ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Off Point. My name's Les Steed.
I'm Marlon White.
And today we have a special guest, spoken word poet and writer extraordinaire, Curly Wordy. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you, that's nice.
Ooh.
Thank you for saying I'm an extraordinaire.
I know, I like that
extraordinaire.
word. I was like, it's extraordinaire.
Yeah,
All right, so let's just kick off with the usual. Tell us about yourself. Don't know why I went camp there, but...
Tell us about myself. Wow, what would you like to know?
Okay, so let's start with, used to be... Okay, so I know I've been all over your website earlier, so we've just been chatting as well.
Did a little bit of research.
Did a little bit of research. I was sitting there just Googling
Research is always
frantically,
good.
like, good God. It's like, why did she do so much?
Well, that's interesting to pick you up on that, because I think there was a point in life where I was very hyper-driven.
Yeah.
Like I was, for me, like achievement was an addiction, you know, and I look back through life and it was, that idea of getting that kind of dopamine drip from like, and some people get it from all sorts of different things, be it shopping, or I get it from there too sometimes, but other addictions that might be less healthy. But for me, it was achievement, and I got addicted to learning, and it was like this unquenchable need to know more. And that's fascinating. So when you say she's done so much, there was a point where I felt like I had all this energy and I had to put it somewhere, and I had to, it was just this desire to just want to know more. Yeah. Just like I was information hungry.
So how did that affect your experience in school? Were you quite academic? Did you go to university?
Or was it something that came along later on in life?
Interesting. My memories of growing up in East London, because I grew up in Tower Hamlets in the 80s in Bow, and
love the
thank
cool.
you.
It's very exciting. So where are you from? Bow.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
Bow. And I talk about being a cockney a lot, and even when I went off to uni, which I'll come to, I was always proud to be an East Ender, and I'd often say to people I was more proud to be a cockney than I was, say, a Londoner, because for me, cockney was a spirit, and you would talk to the cockneys were generally quite chirpy, and they were very welcoming, and it didn't matter. In a way, and it didn't matter where you were. It didn't matter your kind of ethnicity or creed or gender or original, like where your parents were from. If you were born within the sound of the Bow Bells, you are deemed a cockney. So it wouldn't be uncommon to go into like shops where there'd be like second generation Irish, or I went to school with lots of Bangladeshi and Sikh and Hindus, and they had Cockney accents, and they would be deemed a Cockney because they were born there, I love being a Cockney. So sorry, growing up.
Sorry, while we're on the subject of being Cockney, where's the border of where counts as being a Cockney and where doesn't? Because you've got Bow, you've got the East End, and it's a big place.
Well, because Bow, so it starts at St Mary le Bow, which is the church is in Cheapside, which is kind of near Liverpool Street, the Bank.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think Bank, the reason East London was always going to be or take off the way it has is because it was literally on the brink of the banking area. So cheap housing there was kind of bought up massively in the 90s, and slowly.
Liverpool Street?
No, in East London.
But
so the church is in Cheapside, and it runs all the way out to like even here,
like Essex borders.
Yeah. So it's more, but it is more around east, and I'd say Woolwich would be included, and I'd have to double check that if Greenwich was, but.
So am I technically
associating Greenwich
East London or Cockney then?
Oh, I don't know.
Still London. What are you talking about?
No.
You're like your mother's Windrush.
Yeah.
What do you want?
But
you can't have both.
I want everything. I want all the titles.
So it is almost a point up to a certain
juxtaposition of you both.
a certain part of with a Thames, but certainly southeast, I think, surely would be included. It's when you go more like west and north, it's not included. But then you'll go.
It's a different world.
It is a different world.
It's a weirdly different culture, but it's so subtle.
It definitely is, and. Like growing up in Bow, my memories are of freedom really, because I was always out on my BMX, and my BMX had very high currency. I'd always be out, and I was I was quite adventurous and curious, and I used to love insects and birds, and I'd always come home with like a wounded bird on the back of my bike and say to my mum, like, can we keep it?
At the back. Just sit in the back like, please don't eat me.
Yeah.
I've had a rough day.
I remember once my mum finding worms under my pillow because I tried to keep them. She's like, we can't keep them, babe. You got to put them back. Calm. Yeah.
I'd have been like checking you for headlights. I would have freaked out.
Because I had such curly hair, there was points where I regularly had headlights.
Really?
Back. Yeah.
I thought they didn't like curly hair.
Oh, that's a myth.
That's a myth.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I ended up cutting my hair off when I was 8. Really? Yeah, and because I was quite a chubby kid, people started calling me. Do you remember the astrologist Russell Grant?
No.
You've never heard Russell Grant? Look him up. He used to do like because it was Mystic Meg in the News of the World. He used to do one of the horoscopes, and people started saying to me that I looked like Russell. Ouch. Russell Grant, yeah. And years later,
that's
actually,
a dickish thing to say.
Yeah,
to
but
years
later, as a journo,
shaved it off, and it's like, that's brave.
Yeah, I mean, it was cruel. Like kids are cruel, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, but years later, when I met him because he was like campaigning against this motocross planning application that had gone out in Middlesex, and I was a journo on a paper out in Surrey.
So this is Russell Grant.
Yeah.
I mean, that is quite funny. I'm not saying it's uncanny.
I showed
I'm
you
just
a
saying
picture of me as a kid.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like one of the kids being a bully.
That's all right. It's cute.
I mean, it's not. It's bad, but it's creative.
I actually told him. I actually said to him, people used to say I look like you when I was a kid, and he went, "Oh, darling."
Oh, you actually met him?
Yeah, and I spoke to him over the phone when I was a journo, and he was like, "Oh, darling, I do have East End connections, but I hope you don't have my weight problem."
Aww.
And I was like,
I like it when they're a little bit self-conscious, and you're just like, not self-conscious, sorry, but when they're a little bit like. Yeah, when they're a bit more, like down to earth and stuff.
So sorry, I have got sidelined. I'll condense
it's literally called off point.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. So growing up in the East End was lovely. I had loads of memories of like it being very multicultural. My school was really child friendly, and we were like
school that was child friendly. That's always a plus.
It was very. it was very kind of Steiner like. Well, I don't know if you remember the Steiner schools, but very child led and art led. I've got memories of like me saying to like one of my primary school teachers, Mr. Jones, I adored him.
It's amazing you still remember his name. I like like when there's I had this one called Mrs. Robiet, and I still remember her name.
Yeah, teachers are
scary.
Yeah, very very important part of life.
Especially when you're in like year 1, year 2. When did you meet your one? Like...
Well, he was my infant teacher all the way through my infant school, and actually my parents had divorced quite young, and even though I grew up in a very female strong home, and I never had men around, and I look back and think he was like my go-to role model, and I used to sit at his feet. And he was like this tall, 6'2" teacher. I used to sit at his feet and watch his Adam's apple read us. When he read us stories, his Adam's apple would just move with humour, And the way he...
You never know what people are looking at when they talk to you. That's such a very wow. I like that detail.
Yeah, and he was an amazing. I adored him. I used to take him in mince pies. I remember Mum, badgering my mum to go to Percy Ingles so I could get him a cake made for his birthday. I mean, it was like I adored him, and I honestly don't think I would have enjoyed school as much had I not had him around. But my memories were like he would say. I'd say, I want to make this. And we'd look and go, oh, there's no resources. And he'd say, I know, we'll use the carpet. And we'd cut the carpet up in the classroom.
I bet the head teacher liked him. Jesus.
Exactly, yeah. So
it's like, why does this place look like shit? And there's him just like, learning?
But it was such free learning, and it was nice. And
it's creative. It's really inspiring that he's like... Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that you'd get told off for normally. And he's like not encouraging you to do something bad, but encouraging you to use the world around you in the right way.
It was brilliant, and
I wouldn't recommend. For the record, we don't recommend tearing up carpets.
I mean, I'd actually love to see him again. I'd think it'd be brilliant.
He's still kicking around
somewhere. Yeah, I thought I maybe found him on LinkedIn, but but I'm not sure if it's him. But
randomly to spin off at that point, I went online to my primary school, my secondary school, my sixth form. I went online just to see...
making a note of the one I'm going to go find.
Yeah, to see if any of my teachers are still knocking around. So like primary school, none of them are about secondary school, there's one person that's still there, and then there's one person that was a new teacher, and in my sixth form now he's like head or deputy head. So I'm like, wow, he's got promoted. He's done very well.
When I was doing local journalism, I went to my old school just to do the sort of GCSEs, and I got sent there, and all my old teachers, they just looked at me, and every single one of them knew about me. And they were just like, we've been reading your articles. We really like that one on the burst pipe. I couldn't tell them they were taking the piss.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's your teacher.
Yeah.
And you're just sitting there and like, how do you act? I didn't know what to say. I was a bit like, number one, fuck off. And then I was like, sorry, sir.
It's interesting you say that. There's a couple of points there, because my teacher, my infant teacher, loved my stories. And I always used to... Reading never came easy to me at all as a child. And I have very vivid memories of not being able to read and picking up a book and really wanting to read it and trying to read it and missing out chunks of the text.
I used to do that, yeah.
Yeah, and my
you might actually be tweet like us.
Yeah.
Go on.
And so speaking came very easy to me, but reading didn't. And so speaking was almost like, sometimes I refer to my tongue as my paintbrush, because it's like this idea that speaking had no bookends on it, like speaking had no full stops if you didn't have to. And sometimes when I'm really, really like what's the word, like when I'm really, really engaged and really, really into something, I can really talk fast. And I know sometimes I can be perceived as quite like I mean, over the years people would say to me, "Oh, that's quite full on," you know. And I think yeah. So I think when I was able to when I finally found my voice, and as I was saying to you earlier, this unquenchable thirst for knowledge, I always feel like when I went on to secondary school, my teachers saw something in me that I was yet to see in myself, and they poured a lot of like focus into helping me better understand grammar and better understand English. Even my spoken English wasn't great, and
must have adored you for doing, because I know that like as a teacher you instinctively want to help your kids as much as you can.
I've got many teachers that I could say to you 4 teachers in my life.
Did you get all of them cake? Because I bet that's why.
No.
You'd be amazed at how much a little bit of cake gets you.
No, but I know, but my I honestly think I wouldn't be where I am without them. Like, my mum was an incredible strong woman, a very strong woman to be reckoned with, and she did more than her best with the tools she had. Because my mum, life was stacked against her a bit. She was a single parent,
especially in the 80s.
Yeah, and she was very, very talented, but she didn't have an education. So my mum, for the majority of her life, was a cleaner, and but she was very sociable. So she got to know a lot of the schools around my area. She got to know a lot of the teachers, and she used to clean for the teachers. So me and my sister used to go and spend a lot of time after school in these really big houses that were like huge townhouses, and we just didn't like... Yeah, because my mum would sometimes clean after school, and she didn't have anyone to look after us, so we would go and sit in their house while my mum was cleaning them.
Yeah, teachers with big houses.
Did you ever help out with the cleaning?
No, but it was almost like, unbeknown to me, it was giving me an example of what you could achieve that was different from what we had, because we just had like an ex-council masonette. My mum had bought it on the right to buy scheme, but nonetheless it was very different to what I'd ever seen, So I also, outside of school, was around a lot of teachers, unbeknown to what it was doing. But certainly at secondary school, I was quite troublesome up until I was 13. I used to play truant. I used to be really gobby towards some of the teachers. Yeah, I was a bit rogue.
Every teacher loves that kid. It's the one you have to tame, and you're like, all right, you're clever. You're testing me.
Yeah, but I had a lot of rage. That's why, I had a lot of growing up. I was someone that learned how to disassociate early, and I'd had I don't know if it mentions much on my website, but I was born with a facial birthmark as a child, and interestingly at school, aside from being called Russell, which I didn't mind, at primary school at least, people would often call me Cherry Chin, right? Because it was on my chin, and it was like my.
Names did these kids come up for you?
It was. But do you know what? I look back.
Dicks.
I look back, but it was like my chin had been dipped in paint or wine, right? Yeah. And it at that point it was quite endearing because they were people I'd considered friends.
Yeah, of course.
And it was more of a nickname. But I think as I got older and I went through puberty and I started to realise that there was something on my face I didn't ask for. It's like acne that never washed off. It really had a huge impact on my self-worth and my self-esteem. And I think a lot of my secondary school teachers saw that as well, and they just tried to kind of draw out the things that I was good at, which was the academia, you know. And I there was points even up until I did my A levels. I honestly thought I wasn't going to go to uni, and I remember saying to my A level teacher, Miss Campbell, who I must add, she had a first for.
There's always a Campbell.
There's always a Campbell. Hello, Miss Campbell. We're still friends on the social medias and everything. She bought a copy of my the bereavement book I did for kids. Like, she still supports me, and she supported me then. But I always remember she had a first from Cambridge in English. You know, and when
she's in Bow,
when she came to Bow, and she worked at my secondary school, which was Central Foundation along the Mile End Road. At the time, it was the year that the sixth form just opened, and there was 3 of us in her class. So if you think we were technically private tutored,
by a Cambridge
graduate who had a first, and she was the turnaround for me. She taught me what critical thinking was. She taught me what it was to take a text and critique it, and know that you could have an opinion against what an astute or respected writer had written. Before that, I had no idea you could do that, you know. And
not like the comment section these days, trust us.
No, yeah. And so in answer to your...
racist, you dick. Sorry, I'm still not over it. Someone called us racist. I was like,
what?
You couldn't wait.
I wrote a page and a half of reply, and he was like, "No, I'm just not going to reply." Because this is why he has to stop me. But I was like, "Hold me back, bitch." I'm like, having this one. I was like, I almost went for their IP. I was like,
so since we're going off point anyway, sorry. For anybody listening, do you want to just fill the audience in on what happened?
What do you mean?
In terms of the comments that you're...
basically we were interviewing that ADHD surgeon. It's the first one of the season, and first time we've done in a year and a half, I'm super excited about it. So I'm talking over her the whole time, because she's someone I've wanted to talk to for about 3 years. Anyway, and I think at one point, what was it? We watched it earlier, the clip, and at the end of the clip, I'm like, I don't know, she was saying about how she'd been discriminated against because she had ADHD, and I was like, and I think I said something like, or we were talking about it, and we were saying something like, well, that's ridiculous, because imagine if you said that about someone because they were black.
Yeah.
And this little netizen genius decided to, I think that, what was the line? It was like, there was 2 lines, both of which contradicted each other.
As somebody that has ADHD, I wouldn't want a surgeon who has ADHD operating on me.
And then followed it up with the masterpiece. Go on.
They said, to compare being black to having ADHD, first of all, ableist, and also racist, you should be ashamed.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I don't normally lose sleep over these things. I mean, I'm a journalist.
Well, I guess the point was that you were...
it's quite funny,
It's the discriminatory nature, isn't it? That people actually with ADHD and neurodiversity are discriminated against as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the thing is, we
which
both
that
have ADHD.
Was doing in their initial
comments. Yeah.
That's what got me. I was a bit like, I don't have the crayons to unpack this.
Yeah.
And but it's, I mean, neurodivergence is one thing, but I think that, it
all carries its own challenges, doesn't it? And I think that, interestingly,
it's also got a lot of fun bits to it, though.
Because
you get to be bouncy, and I think that you do a lot of things that most people wouldn't dare to do without thinking about it. I think that's one of the things. Yeah.
Sort of spin back on point with the topic.
He's been briefed. We've been watching the.
I think you mentioned that you have dyslexia, so I think that'd be a good point.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that as well.
Yeah, I think
is that why you wanted to go into spoken word more than sort of traditional written poetry?
Yeah.
Even though that doesn't have any grammatical rules to it either.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird one. So I've never been diagnosed with dyslexia.
Right.
I've even often wondered whether I'm also dyspraxic, because I'm very, very I know it's not the only trait, but I tend to fall over a lot, bump into things a lot, and I drop things a lot.
So what is that?
Dyspraxia sorry.
No, please go on.
Dyspraxia is where you're not sure where your limbs are. So normally if I was to do, if I was to reach like Glasgow, looking, I could reach it.
Yeah.
If I was dyspraxic, I'd probably be over here because you can't really, you can't feel where stuff is.
Right.
Some of the kids we teach at swimming, one of them has it definitely, and she's so cute because she's got the biggest grin on her face, and her arms will go out here.
Yeah.
And you're like, I love you so much. But seriously, go up.
Yeah. Because it's interesting. So with the dyslexia, I've diagnosed myself really, and I think, like I say, reading didn't come easy to me, and I there's a part of me that feels like the cockney. My first job was at 15 on a market stall in Roman Road, and I was immersed in language. To me, the language was art, you know, and language had always been art, you know. So that's how I learned to read, by sound. And actually, if you think babies learn to read with their ears first, right? So reading comes to us through sound. So I always...
You sound it out, don't you?
Yeah, and I still do. Phonetically, I still will sound a lot of things out. And even... So when I went off to uni and I had to do all these kind of big essays, studying didn't come easy to me at all, but I was determined to get an education. And I had always been taught that, you know, even my teachers were like, you've got to go to uni. And I'm like, but am I the kind of person that goes to uni? And they're like, who is the kind of person that goes to uni? But I felt like I wasn't that person because I was from the East End and I thought I had to be more middle class, I guess. And little did I know, right? But yeah, it wasn't really until I went into journalism that I struggled a bit with some aspects of writing and grammar. And then I loved journalism, but it never felt fully creative enough for me.
That's how I felt about it as well.
So to interrupt quickly, what was it journalism you did in university?
No, so my degree was in first I did a year of psychology and then decided to defer, and I deferred onto history, and I did some modules in sociology and anthropology. Wow. And because I'd always been interested in humanities and human story.
That's a lot of ground to cover as well.
Well, interestingly though, if you think, you know, growing up in the East End, immersed in story, immersed in the everyday, and I'd always been drawn to the everyday person that had so much, like, proudness and humility, but they didn't have much, but they had,
pride.
And they had character, you know, they had spirit, you know, and
confidence. I think that's quite an interesting point, because a lot of the time nowadays, a lot of people, at least, you know, a lot of people I tend to meet, like, that kind of confidence seems to be almost not quite frowned upon, but if you've got that kind of strong character, it's almost seen as being sort of not, you know, something that people...
Not composed, it's almost a bit...
Or intent, or a bit much, or something like that.
And you're right, it's almost like...
It's almost a negative
you've not been
connotation
trained.
Like,
I remember going to uni and feeling like I wasn't polished, you know, in a way where I was just being myself, and maybe it was a bit messy in parts.
People tend to be a bit slippery.
Yeah,
a bit
they
boring.
can be. Yeah,
it's very dull when you have a conversation with something that's that polished. That
you don't get the authenticity. I don't think.
Yeah, it's creepy.
Yeah,
it's really creepy.
So so then the journalism for me was amazing. It was the most knowledgeable job I've ever done, and I'd done it with heart and joy, but it never paid enough. And for me, it was like a lot of people that I moved in, the circle I moved in at the time, they were doing it for leisure, not living. And I had to make sure I had a job.
You have to be middle class to be a journalist. That's why they're all middle class.
It was an elitist profession. Yeah, it really was.
You can't afford it unless you've got someone backing you a bit.
And so, you know, without going into the whole length of it, when I came out of journalism and went and lived in Oz for a bit, and whilst I was in Oz, I dabbled in journalism, mainly did a bit of photography, and then I returned home. My mum had been sick, and my family became her carers, and then off the back of that, trained as a teacher, rediscovered a joy of education again, and it's almost like I went back to school myself and filled the gaps that I had as a child. And then it wasn't until I was about 5 years into teaching I realised it wasn't a career for life. No. I did an MA in play therapy.
It's the money, isn't it? Again,
I did an MA in play therapy, and whilst training to be a creative arts therapist, I was reconnected with the joy of diary keeping again and rock journaling, and it was from the journaling that I just first started to write down again in rhythmic fashion. And even as a child I wrote a lot of poetry. I've got friends that I've reconnected with that said, do you not remember writing me this poem when you were 11? Aww. You know, and I'd forgotten all that part of myself post mum dying, almost like the grief had blocked it out. But so in answer to your question with the dyslexia and all the suspected dyslexia and then the spoken word, yes, I mean, gosh, spoken word, when I tell friends I do it now, they're like, oh my God, of course that was so for you. Of course that's what you had to do, you know, like, because you've always been able to speak for England, you know, and you've always been...
That's a little bit backhanded, that one, isn't it?
It is a bit backhanded, and I didn't, and actually in one of my poems, I don't know if you've watched any of them, but there's one poem called What's a Free Word Worth, and there's a bit in it where I call out those people and I say, oh God, I'll have to, there's a part where I say...
I have to ask about this as well.
Yeah,
go on.
There's a part where I kind of say, because sometimes I felt like people made me feel like I spoke thick. So I'd say, talk thick. Socially awkward or socially advanced, mate. I could talk underwater. Damn right. I could talk the iron legs off a donkey. Damn straight. Hanging off your ear roll, because this loquacious babbler's got soul. I could talk for England. I hope so. Let's go. So it's this idea that, yeah, if you backhand me, I'll meet you there and say, I fucking can, and it's a skill. You know, it's a golden skill to be able to talk, you know. And you're right. Like, there was points in my life where I was ridiculed for being such an over-talker. And it wasn't until I trained to be a therapist, I'll never forget being held.
So play therapist or sort of like sit down and listen.
The play therapy is you still have to go through like counselling training.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're doing the training, you're in a room with 15 other people. I'll never forget the facilitator who like led the whole course. We explored all different masks that we'd put on, and you know, the kind of parts of ourselves that we don't show because we feel that they're a little bit more tainted. And when I kind of revealed that I'd always felt like my mouth had been censored a bit because I'd always been made to feel like I talk too much, she was like, no, Lou, like, the world needs all sorts of people, and the world needs talkers. The world needs people that, you know, and when someone comes, someone turns around and calls you Bobby,
the wrong kind of people, I think.
They're trying to keep you pushed down, you know. So the spoken word, it gives me freedom, and spoken word, it was almost like me sticking my finger up at the people that made me feel like I didn't, just because I didn't have the right grammar tools doesn't mean I couldn't write, because I fucking could.
No,
and just because I spoke Cockney, I could write.
If anything, you've kind of really gone for that kind of, you know, someone's told you can't do something, you've literally made a career.
But I've almost like, it wasn't until I trained as a therapist, you know, the writing came out of me in a way. Like one of my poems, which I haven't performed in a while, it's called If Walls Could Talk, and it's about domestic violence, because as a child my sister and I experienced it and witnessed it, and because I'd been exploring a lot around my childhood memories and the memories of my home and my father and my mum, I wrote this initially in a journal, and it came out, and it was just like that. The first line, like, if walls could talk, they'd say it started way back before you were even born, way back before your parents laid together, when your ancestors, they didn't know any better, you know. And it just kind of spilled out of me because I'd been reading all this stuff up about neuroscience, and I started to really come to understand where trauma and intergenerational stuff comes from.
Do you mind if I ask if was that directed towards your mother, or was it to you?
The poem itself?
No, the violence.
No, it was towards my mother, and, you know, never to condone it, but on a pyramid of, like, you know, if you went up on a scale of domestic abuse, it was certainly not by any stretch the worst. It was emotional abuse predominantly towards my mother, and near the end of the relationship, physical abuse, and then my mum left. And actually,
by your father?
By my father, yeah. And it wasn't until my parents... it wasn't until really it became a little bit more physical that my mum left. And my sister and I, for years, that night that my mum left my father played out in our head like a motion picture. And because no one had ever spoken to us about it, because there was quite poor emotional communication in our home,
that generation in general,
it was like it just kept playing and playing. So when I finally got to a point where I could release it, it released through poetry. So all of a sudden, I've stepped into this new paradigm, this new arena, where not only am I reconnecting with my love of writing, which was what made my heart sing as a child, I'm now connecting with my truth, my narrative, and I'm believing that there's a way that I can merge my love of writing and my narrative, and I can share it in the hope that it resonates with other people. And when I stepped in front of those open mics for the first time, it was never... You know, of course you get a hit of dopamine from it and stuff like that, but it was never from a place of ego. It was from a place of healing. It was because, like, it was like a final tip of the cap to the thing I'd been through, and it wasn't. And people would say, "You're so brave talking about such raw stuff," and I'd say, "No, the brave part is admitting it, realizing it, and then when you share it, you're letting it go. You're giving it out there and hoping it supports other people in that journey." You know,
So can I take you back to when you first did spoken word and what that was like?
I wanted to ask
what prompted you to doing that,
and also what was it like? Sorry, we shouldn't double it. Go on.
No way.
But I just wanted, just if I could just touch on it actually. The first time you stood in front of the mic and did it, what did that feel like?
Wow, there's two really, because I started performing first over Instagram.
Right.
Yeah, and it was during over COVID. Sorry, now I'm a teacher. I can say this, although it wasn't like I was moonlighting, but I was doing home learning. So obviously, when we were off, when we weren't doing the online learning, I was going to the park and I was sometimes writing. And my friend that I'd met at the gym kept sending me these like sharing the profiles via Instagram of poet nights, and she was going, "You're so good. You've got to go to one of these.
Did you
got to go to one of these?"
With me?
And she kept sending me them, right? And I was like, "Oh fuck, I don't know." Like, so anyway, I started following this guy from Southend called Sonny Green, fantastic poet. Look Sonny Green up if you haven't already. And he used to run a night called Trouble Tongues, and so I used to follow his Instagram lives, and I was like, "Wow, this is really good." And he started inviting people to go on, so I just thought, "Fuck it, I'm going to send an invite." So I sent an invite, and I was thinking, you know, he won't recognise my name, he won't invite me on, and then lo and behold, it was like, "We're zooming into your living room."
Oh,
you know?
fuck! I should have tidied.
Yeah. And all of a sudden,
you're looking around, you're like, there are too many bottles in here for this to be public.
All of a sudden, there's me and Sonny Green on the screen, and I've still got the footage and I've still got the stills, and I look so elated. I look young. Aww. I look so fresh-faced. It's like I look like I've reconnected with what I term like the maiden in me, the woman, the younger woman in me that had all those aspirations to be, you know, because when I was a journalist, I wanted to be a newsreader, I wanted to go into radio, I wanted to do all this stuff, and I kept hitting the glass ceiling. So, and I never felt like, I felt my time, in a way, I felt like my time to write and my time to present on the rate was over. Yeah. Especially when I was teaching and I'd lost my mum, and I was in a mindset where I was like, oh, that's my past life, and now this is my new life. And it was taking me, the grief was stopping me from reconnecting with that old life. So anyway, I'm in front of Sonny Green, and I performed If Walls Could Talk. And he reached out to me afterwards and said, wow, like one of the very first poem raps, because he's quite rappy, that I ever performed was about domestic violence. The video's still on YouTube, go and check it out. And then after COVID, after the lockdown was lifted, Sonny did an open mic night at the Jargo in Dalston, which is where it used to happen. And I went down, and as soon as I'd given my name Curly Wordy, because I loved Curly Wordies when I was a kid. You know,
I bet your handwriting's phenomenal.
Yeah.
My wife loves them as well.
So little love hearts.
I've been called Curly Wordy a few times on stage. I'm like, no, it's Curly Wordy. But anyway, I went down to his night, right? And as soon as I walked in, he went to me, Curly Wordy, you're going on stage. And I was like, oh my God, am I? And I was like, no, I just thought I'd come and sit in the background. And it was nerve-wracking. I was, you know, my chest was pumping like the adrenaline and the heart was
they look
pumping.
At you like as a judge, like, you know, like you just
yeah,
sit there
you're thinking, you know, I mean, are you worried about the judgment of others, or are you judging yourself? You know, I think part of it's about self-judgment, you know, and as soon as I got up there, I just thought, fuck it, like, you know, in the end.
So do you mind if I cut in quickly? Are you quite confident in terms of public speaking in the first place?
I was to a point where and this is interesting what I said earlier about my birthmarks. Even sometimes things can come back and benefit you. I think I was so used to being stared at as a kid, because people would come up to me and they, like, again, one of my poems, my words, there's a point where I say, chin gazing at my Orion, that plump red crimson skin, part of my facial constellation built in, because people would come up to me and just stare at my chin like that. It's like they were staring into my chin.
My eyes are up here, thank you, darling.
That's what it felt like. And I'd be waiting I'd be waiting anxiously for them to go, what's that? And it was always the way so it's almost like whenever I went into social situations, I had dread. I had dread. Yeah, but years later, I think the fact that I had that means that when I got up and I had people looking at me, and back then when I was a kid, you know, take it how you wish, take it how you will. It might be seen as sad, but you know, back then people were looking at me as a kid, and I was thinking all sorts of things. What are they thinking? Sometimes they were thinking horrible things. So now, all these years later, as an adult, I don't give a fuck what you think of me now,
so you can't
because of
now,
that. Yeah, because of that, I think. You know, yeah. So if you're looking at me and thinking, like, look at the state of her hair, or look, she's got a bogey hanging out of her nose, or whatever it is, I wouldn't care.
No, I was having a bogey out of
no, I have had a bogey hanging out of my nose once, right? I went go-karting, right, at university with a group of 4 boys, two of which I lived with. Yes, Andy Britton and James Hopkins, yeah, and I won. right?
Oh, nice.
And I was gloating. I was
Is that because you were quite light compared to the lads? Because I found that.
Yeah, and I was gloating. I was happy, and I went into the changing room to get changed, and I had a bogey sitting over my nose, like it was actually hooked over my nose, like.
On it, right? Oh.
And not one of them said, "Oh, you got to."
Yeah, I bet
because they probably thought
how about
you
selfie,
smug.
shall we, love?
You smug cow.
Let's get a good selfie for old time's sake. There she is. Love it.
With a bogey.
Oh.
But yeah, so so with the open mic thing, it was so amazing, and what I say to people now is when you get that feeling, it's your heart letting you know you're in the right place, It's okay to get those nerves, and actually if you say on stage to someone or to people, God, wow, it's been a while I felt this nervous, it all plays to the authenticity that people read from you, because you don't want to be fake. I certainly, the stories I share are all my own narratives, so...
It has to be, yeah. Otherwise it doesn't kind of come across the same way. It's like if you write fiction, it's not quite the same.
It's not. It's nice to, so it snowballed from there, really, and it was the first time in a very long time, I have to say, and a big shout out to the spoken word community. They're very welcoming, and it's a tribe of people who, different strokes for different folks, but you'll never be met with any negativity. And every event I've gone into, your vibration is matched, your energy is matched, so you're there. And
if you're absolutely shitting and the whole audience suddenly sitting there going, oh, Christ.
But people want you to do well,
That's
and I've never been really, because obviously in journalism, as you know, you don't get to, like in poetry and spoken word, they often say to the audience, make sure you give the poets their flowers, which means verbal thanks, right? And in journalism, you don't get that verbal thanks. You don't get feedback really on how well you've done.
I asked about this yesterday, this morning. It's like you kind of like put it out there in the hope that it does something.
Yeah, but you don't ever hear anything, right, unless it's a complaint sometimes.
Yeah, usually.
But with spoken word, you'll get like the amount of events I've been to, and I'll leave with my cup overflowing. And I've not asked those people to come up to me and say, "Wow, that one about your mum really touched me."
Is that for tips?
It was
like your emotional cup.
Oh, okay, emotional cup.
Yeah, so it's like they'll come up and they'll say to you, that when I read my one about my birthmark, which is one I really love reading because it's a really empowering piece. This girl came up to me at the end that had suffered really severely with acne, and we had this long chat, and she was like, I've never something has never resonated with me so much, and she even DM'd me afterwards saying, I was so moved, I you brought me to tears, and it's nice when
you
people...
write something and it makes someone cry in a good way. That's something that you never forget. I've written love letters before, and like when you see that tear go down, and you're like, got him.
I'm yet to write a love poem, but at some point I will. But I think it might be about my it's hard to explain, like my growth through the path of relationships, because again, I never really had, my dad's love language is acts of service, and he's great at DIY. Yeah.
I don't want to diss your dad.
Yeah,
I know that
my
you
father's,
that relationship.
yeah, and
actually,
my father's, I think I would never have had the relationship I have with my dad now if my mum hadn't passed away. And me and my sister always thought someone like my father would go first, but my mum went first, but my dad has done his best, and he grew up in an era, East End, Giza, there was now we can go on a computer and on Google and write John Bowlby attachment styles, Google, and the average layperson can read what their psychology is. But back in the day, poor people had no access to that stuff. They were kept in the dark. And actually I'm working on a piece at the minute, and I'd like to think it can become a longer piece eventually about the East End. But there's a line in it where I say...
I've thought about it that way, actually, because the internet's kind of become the great leveller in that regard,
It really has, yeah. And if you think...
And information is power.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And I certainly gained incredible self-awareness and incredible power and clarity through gaining knowledge. So if you're going to keep poor working class people in the dark, you're going to keep them pigeonholed. And there's a line in my new piece that says pigeonholed like vermin. But the budget you live on doesn't determine your brain's value or discipline. And you can't put a price on the willpower of the people that have to live with less. And it's this idea that just because you have less doesn't mean you've got any less of a drive or motivation to be something in life. But if you're going to keep people pigeonholed, how do you expect them to grow their brains? How do you expect them to access to? But how do you expect that person to be the world's best father when they had a shit father themselves? Or how do you expect that mum?
There's that whole thing of like, you know, like if your parents are shitty with abuse, victims of abuse, they tend to become abusers themselves, and like, you know, obviously there's no implication to everyone, but there was notable trend apparent. You know, when we were studying psychology, for example, it was something that came up, and it was like, I can't remember what the study was, but there was a correlation that they found. And that's no reflection.
Yeah, no, I mean, gosh, I
level,
think one thing for me,
scary.
one thing for me in life is when I eventually was able to access therapy. Like I had 10 years of therapy post my mum dying, and I was the kind of person that always said, "Me, I don't need therapy."
Yeah, it's a tough bit, though, isn't it?
And I associated emotions with weakness, you know, because that's what I'd been taught. Again, like I say, I was very loved growing up. But sometimes you can be loved, and Gabor Mate says a lot of this in a lot of his books,
like him,
right?
yeah.
You can be loved, but if you don't sense the love, if you don't access the love in the same way that parent feels that they're giving you that love, you can still feel a bit unseen. And you know, and I think I was very loved, and my mum went above and beyond for me and my sister. But both my parents had unresolved issues, you know. And I think that in that poem I mentioned, there's a bit where I say it was like moth to a flame, love to loathe, combust not lust, incessant battles, never won, unresolved, bitter jaws, where, you know. And it's this idea that they were always at each other's throats, but you never knew where it started.
That's interesting.
You know, so, you know, and whilst I would never condone any type of emotional, verbal or physical abuse, or I do come to realise that there's always two sides of a story, you know.
Is it coming from a place of desperation and sort of miscommunication rather?
I think sometimes. I think it's different if... I think,
malevolent intent, so to speak.
And I must say, I must mention this because this is something I'm really proud of. I've just secured a 1-year contract working as a counsellor in women's refuge.
Oh, wow.
And it's something I always wanted to do since I was a teenager. Yeah. And it will be for 12 months, and I accepted it because I'm like, you know what, this is what I'm made for, you know. And
it's quite an emotional calling as well, and it's going to be quite emotionally taxing for you as well, because, you know, somebody's experienced it to whatever extent, I think.
But I want to try and use it in a way where, but at the end, I'm hoping I can make some kind of short, not a monologue, spoken word, but like I want to see if I can piece together something where there's a little show and it's around the effects of DV on a whole family, not just on the couple themselves.
I reckon that would work quite well as sort of, not a puppet show, but you know those ones with the black, with the sort of light behind,
like the dancers,
not marionettes, just the marionettes. No, marionettes, the ones that come from above. They're little. You know, in Harry Potter with the Deathly Hallows and the way they tell that, with the blacked out animations, I think, you know, I can imagine that would be quite an interesting one if you use different elements of colour with that.
And that's quite cool, because it would almost play on the idea of we've all got shadows.
Yeah, like,
you know, if you think of Carl Jung and like this idea, I read a great quote by him recently, and I love his stuff. But he was talking about how we don't just like walk into the light. You know, actually, it's because you've got to allow your shadows to become conscious. You've got to allow the shadows to have an outlet.
It's that sort of dark
we
side.
We do this instead.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of
down and.
Because is that kind of coming from a contemporary social attitude, do you think? Because I think that, I mean, because I went through a bit of a shit time for about a year or two ago, and I kind of had to reconnect with I had to redefine masculinity almost in a way for myself, because, you know, like I just kind of had the shit kicked out of me by, you know, and I felt terrible about myself. And, you know, like emotionally speaking, and I was a bit like, okay, well, what is and isn't acceptable masculine behaviour? And I found a lot of these channels on YouTube, and, you know, like people like, you know, Sydney Watts, who I think is now a doctor, and, you know, Patient Xenia and things like that. And they will talk about sort of how a lot of the time you find men, you know, the contemporary men have been kind of told that they have to be emotional at the same time as not being emotional, and, you know, that concept of masculinity has become very, very skewed and very kind of confusing. And one of the things I like about my current girlfriend, for example, she's Eastern European, and one of the things she said to me is like, I just want you to be a bloke, you know, like just go out, do, you know, like, you know,
what you need to do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like, you don't like pick and put down some heavy stuff if you have to,
but don't feel like the emotions are off,
you know, access,
or you know,
It is a turn off.
It's not allowed.
Blokes talk too much about their emotions, but at the same time, a little bit,
I like it. I think
you open
it's
up eventually. I think it's a bit easier.
I think it's good if they can. I mean, there's this whole thing, isn't there, about conscious men now, and you're right. Like I agree with you. I think there's a bit of a crisis for some where they don't know where to sit with it because women are in this power stage of life where so many women are just like going forward and like leading the way on things, and you can feel a bit. People can feel a bit emancipated, if that's the word, but
domesticated, I think.
What is it?
Emancipated or domesticated? Who cares?
What does emancipated mean then?
Like when you're sort of
removed,
freed, like
yeah,
at a young age.
Yeah, the Emancipation Proclamation is where you remove yourself.
It's interesting.
I know, like in America, you can get emancipated when you're underage as an adult.
So
it's interesting.
Yeah.
My I do used to do that a lot. When I was growing up, because I had quite restricted vocabulary, I used to like this when I was a journalist. Thank you. But yeah, and do you know what? I have to say the reason is again when I was hyper focused on this idea that I was like I've got to master English because it became acutely aware to me at a certain age that I wasn't as eloquent as others, right? And I was hungry for language. I would have loved to have studied linguistics or. And I'd love to I'm obsessed with the idea of dialects and how it connects to belonging.
Because I think like it's interesting in England, for example. Like I mean, compared to America or other places I've been, like the accent changes every 20 miles, if not less. Especially in London. London, you can go. I mean, there's a difference with South London, and you can hear it. But I mean, do you think that accents kind of have a lot to do with what makes us, or is it more like the environmental factor behind where we come from that's part of it? Or, for example, if you put on a different accent, then would that be something that would kind of change you as well?
I don't know. I think that dialect is really connected to community. I think language is connected to community and belonging. I think language is connected to home. So therefore, the things, the slang that we develop, the words that we come to love, the words that we come to know as familiar, that nan or gran or dad or mum have said, or our carers or our guardians have said, actually becomes part of who we are, and it's comforting.
It's a familiarity, isn't it?
Yeah, offers comfort. So there was certainly a point in my life when I felt very uncomfortable around posh people.
I wouldn't blame you.
And this is the truth. And I remember, and my sister went through
a bit weird, aren't they?
Well, I think it's just we felt less. We felt like we were.
Did they make you feel less, or did you kind of have that feeling yourself?
They made me feel less. And my sister worked in the banking industry for years in Canary Wharf, and she was often ridiculed for having a Cockney accent.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they probably found it funny. But to her, she took it as a real dent. And
she's doing the same job as they are, and she's just as good, if not better.
Les, would you describe yourself as posh?
Yeah, probably. I'm from Surrey. I mean, Jesus Christ.
What I'm saying is now I wouldn't even think you. I wouldn't even categorise that. That's just your accent. There was a point in my life as a teenager. I had never been exposed to posh people. Like I'd only ever been around people like, "All right, how are you? All right, have a think, have an apple and pears and all that stuff, And
I do want to ask about Cockney rhyming slang if that's still a thing.
And
I had to learn that at school.
You had to learn Cockney at school?
Yeah.
As in, just a one-off English lesson, or was it more...
just you're doing your little English lessons, they're teaching you about Cockney rhyming slang and all that. So.
I swear we only hear apples and pears, and then
that's the most common one, isn't it?
Yeah. It's how often do you talk about
brown bread, you're dead.
Yeah, fall on your bottle and glass ass.
Right.
If
having a giraffe.
Yeah, having a giraffe laugh, yeah.
You sound tired just to be like, oh, here we fucking go.
No. You know what? I love Cockney slang, and actually, I was immersed in it as a child. My dad loved it. He still uses it. My dad's got lots of slang for his own money as well, and I think slang's a beautiful thing because we learn to, and even as an early years teacher, rhyme is important for reading, so when you hear Cockney slang being used in the home, it ain't a bad thing because it is really important for reading. And but no, Cockney slang's really simple. Basically, lots of people used to believe it was used by criminals, only like gangster-type people in the East End. Coded language. And it's partly true, but it was actually the costermongers, which is what...
What's a costermonger?
Costermonger are the market sellers. Right. So that was the original name for a market seller, costermonger. And they used to use them because lots of poor people post-Blitz in the East End could not afford coal and could not afford decent food, so they would never go into top-end shops, right? So the costermongers would go, and by whatever means, some of it was criminal activity, they would get hold of certain food and they would sell it at the markets to the poor people. So it's like a Robin Hood type scenario, And they devised really Cockney slang, you know, because it was so they could evade the police, and the police wouldn't understand what they were saying.
That's clever.
Yeah, and so it really is.
Considering the fact that, you know, like we were just talking before about the fact that, you know, like there was that sort of almost suppression of information in the more lower class areas. Is lower class the right word? I don't know.
No, it is, yeah. So the poorer areas.
But then you come up with a clever way around the fact that these people are trying to dick on you.
Yeah.
I think that's
God, like, you know, don't get me wrong. People in the East End, and I'm not being biased here. I remember growing up with people that were incredibly entrepreneurial, and they just didn't have the resources. And actually, in one of my early poems, the one I mentioned earlier, "What's a Free Word Worth?" There's a line where I say, "When you ain't got money, you've got ideas," and that's truly it. When you don't have money, you know, drive often stems from the survival instinct.
Yeah, the need to generate.
So to be hyper driven is like, right, I've got to generate something to survive. That's where it comes from. And I met so many people that could have been like Dragon Den type people, could have gone on and, you know, created their own products and businesses, and they didn't, because they weren't in that mental capacity as well. It wasn't, yes, they didn't have the financial capacity, but actually the social economic status and the education system and the government had worn them down to believe that they were less.
Yeah.
You know, and after a while,
like, you know, because
it's
that whole sort
grabbing,
of like, if you want to start a business, you'll need capital, and where are you going to find that, pleb?
Yeah,
that kind
basically,
of feeling. Yeah.
And there's a line that I've just written in my poem, and it's about this idea that people thought I was going to be a pleasant pleb. You know, like
a pleasant pleb. I like that.
And I'm like,
I mean, I don't like it.
No. But I love playing on words like that, phrase, and it's like, oh, she'll be a quiet one. And when I was a journalist, I felt that way.
Yeah.
Oh, she's like the token. Oh, look, we're supporting the working class community, and you know, she's a pleasant pleb, you know. But little did they know that I was a pleb with a passion.
Yeah, pleb with a bit of fire under you.
Plebitor. I call myself the plebitor.
The plebinator.
I am the plebinator.
Yeah. Look at him, it's like, and then I'm going to rob you cunts on principle. Now, where's your fucking horse?
Give me your money. Get out of my pub.
Yeah, just standing there. It's like, you don't carry a knife? Oh, just me then, cunts. Give us your wallets.
It's
if they're going
true.
to look at you like it, you might as well play into it.
It's true. So in answer to what you're saying about the lack of education, I see it now. Now my dad's older. I see my dad has got so many skills, and you know, and he's really tried over the years. I've seen his growth and change, you know, and when I think back, and I must say, despite the kind of marriage my parents had and the early experience I had, you know, I do.
There is something in the air. I found something in my mouth as well.
I do think people deserve a second chance, and I think my dad has really worked hard to be the best father he can be with the tools that he's had. Yeah. And I think that sometimes we have to, even though when we get angry at our parents, and I was angry and rageful for years with different aspects of both my parents, we have to meet it with you have to meet the human side of them and understand that what did culture give them at the time? What did society give them at the time? What tools were they gifted to understand their own internal dialogue, their own early childhood? Like sometimes.
How did you kind of? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off at all, because I think that where you're going is really good. But it's like, because you've said that, you know, like, so you had the whole background which your dad was quite sort of emotionally violent, and then your mum left. How did he reconcile with you emotionally after? I mean, like, what was the turning point for you where you were like, all right, I'll give him a chance, kind of thing?
I think the turning point was my mum dying. Because my mum for years had been the root of our family. It was always me, Sarah, and mum. My sister's 3 years older than me. My mum was just a powerhouse.
Did you live with your mum afterwards?
Yeah, so my parents separated. I was 8, my sister was 11, and my dad, we used to see my dad on a Sunday, and he almost became like fun time dad, really. He'd pick us up, we'd go ice skating, and he taught us how to swim. He used to take us. Oh yeah, you know.
He still made the effort.
Oh, massively, you know. And he did what he could with the tools he had. But he was always a very quiet man, and he was quiet because, in a way, again, it's the linguistic skill, the vocabulary wasn't there. Yeah, And so I sometimes think between the pair of them, my mum was like this massive sociable person, compassionate, empathetic, liberal.
Those kind of opposites attract.
Yeah, chatty. And my dad was like this man of very few words, obsessed with football, always had his head under a motor because he was a mechanic.
Oh,
And it was like they were so very different.
Very archetypal.
Yeah, and very. But he's really, I think it's a really important question that you ask, because for a long time it was all about my mum, because of course she was the root. And when mum died, I was like, well, we've just got to try and piece together a different, it's almost like I often equate it to like, say you've got a car and it loses a wheel. That car can still run, but it, especially if you turn it into a freewheeler, but it's going to run, but it's going to run a bit differently, And I think that a lot of, a bit wonky. And I think it's a good metaphor for people for kids who experience parent separation. It's different, but it will still run eventually, And we, over time, we saw my dad oddly more when my parents separated, because my mum was just always doing everything. My dad was always at work or at the pub at the time, back in the day.
Did you go to see him at the pub, or was it like?
No, we never. My mum wasn't much of a drinker, so we never went to the pub. But my
So how old were you when your parents separated again? Sorry.
So it was it was 87. So 87, 88. I was just about to turn 8.
Oh, okay.
So and it was actually the month of the Great Storm, and I really want to write a poem called The Great Storm, and it's going to be about the night that my mum left my dad. And the first line is, and this isn't a lie, I was playing with my Barbie and my Ken upstairs, and the first line of it was going to be, my Barbie and Ken weren't feeling very zen that night. Boom, boom, boom. But
it's quite a good
but I just want to say he's done his best, and I think that he's, you come to understand, I've come to understand, I can't say others, but through training to be a therapist and really delving deep into my own feelings, sometimes it isn't about blame, it's understanding the circumstances at the time. And I think when my mum passed, I was able to look at my life through a different window, metaphorically. So instead of looking at it down this tunnel, I took it from a different perspective, and I tried to understand what was going on around them at the time that would have put pressure on their situation. And my mum gave as good as she got. My mum, they argued massively. My mum gave back. But equally, I think the best example she ever modelled to me and my sister was leaving. And I've got myself into one situation where it wasn't like that, but it was. He wasn't very nice to me verbally, and there was a point where I stayed for a while, and then almost like the penny dropped, and I was like, "Oh, this has got to change," and I left.
To touch upon that point, in your like adult life in terms of relationship, did that impact the
literally just wrote that question down? How did that impact?
And you're doing shorthand. I'm so impressed.
Thank you.
It's been a while since I've seen that. Bloody hell! Do you know how many times I failed that fucking exam?
Oh, I failed it. I got fired because we it was a final straw. Apparently, they were getting rid of me anyway.
So is that a journalist?
Yeah. Shorthand's a journo thing. It's T-line, and you mostly use it for shopping after a while. But you only get 100 words per minute. Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
You
can do 80 as well.
Yeah, I got about 70, and I was like, fuck it. I'll just get a recorder and sneak it to court.
It's the one thing that you think, why?
Yeah, and then
why do it?
It is handy, and I'm really happy. But the thing is, I always look over it, and I always think I'm going to read it, and I never do. But in situations like this, it's kind of handy because it's like I do it most because I'm lazy.
I'd love to write a poem in shorthand.
Oh, I've done.
Imagine if you ever got published.
I do it when I'm drunk.
You would just have one of your poems in shorthand.
So when you do
no one else can read the damn thing.
So when you do your journalist qualification, you have to learn about shorthand.
It's part of the NCTJ, but I didn't have to. But I did some extra training when I was local, because you have to have it to be able to go to court. The court system here, they won't let you record anything, which you normally would with like a video recorder.
Yeah, and they believe that it's like. If say, for instance, you always have to leave in notebooks. If you were to ever leave,
it's legally
you would
admissible.
leave them.
In
case they ever needed to check back.
Yeah, because if you write something in shorthand, it's deemed to be an accurate recording of anything. So, for example, if you were to say, "I'm going to stab him," and I happen to jot that down,
you'd jot it down verbatim. Yeah,
you'd have to do it verbatim, and then it would be like, according to these notes,
right.
Marlon said, "I'm going to stab him," and then he went and stabbed him.
Right.
So basically, I can write, but that leaves you open. Well, not you specifically, but it leaves people open because what I could do is I could just sit here, write something down I want you to say.
Yeah.
And then if you were to
So it's not as accurate as a dictaphone, yeah.
Right.
No, it's still subject to human perversion, but, I mean, moving...
Interesting logic, so it's tradition.
Right.
Old school, that British establishment
I like
profession.
it.
It is nice, but...
Is it something that is difficult to learn?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's a
because it's a symboled system, so it's like there's a symbol.
You know what?
So there's certain common symbols, and then there's a method by, like you'll have a word, and then if it's like love and then lovely, you'd attach something.
Like love is that.
You know what? You've left your notepad here, and I've showed my wife. I'm like, what the hell is this left written down? You asked
What's
the boy.
he up to?
You asked the boy like a notepad, like in season 2. You left it here, and I was just
in the day.
And I was just like, going, I was just looking at it.
Season 2 Les thing.
Yeah.
Like, now I'm the new and improved season 3 Les.
And I was just looking at it, and I said to my wife, I'm like, what the hell is Les writing? Is it like algebra? What the hell is this?
Yeah, it's
it's the type of it like that. Yeah, I like the look.
That's
of
good
it.
to know. That's good to know. That you're not crazy.
I am crazy. You know I'm crazy. That's why I'm here. You invited me to co-host because I'm crazy.
I just had a thought going off the point.
Go on.
But,
Hey, she's been reading stickers. I knew these stickers would pay off, my lord. I told you.
I just wanted to touch back on the abuse thing because I earlier.
So we have really gone off point there.
No, but earlier in the year I had such a great opportunity, and this is one thing I really believe in. Like over the years, I read books about law of attraction and manifesting and like universal, like quantum physics and things like that. And I really believe that if you can clear your kind of energy well enough and set very clear intentions, things do come your way. Yeah. And I had found myself performing my If Walls Could Talk poem at this festival for changing the narrative around trauma. Off the back of that, I met 2 people that were running a project called Survivor Voices and Traumascape, and it's about how they change the ecosystem and the narratives around people coming to understand that they're even being abusive, or that they have come from an abusive situation.
Like, where is that
often
line,
people,
of course, between being angry?
I think
sometimes people won't even know that they're being abused.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point there, because I don't think a lot of people set out to be abusive.
No.
Set out to be this person.
It's conditioning, especially if you saw your dad do it, and then your dad's dad becomes, and it's part of the cultural terminology that's been said to a woman, or it could be. So sometimes it's complete conditioning, and they don't know that they're just becoming a carbon copy of what their dad was, or their
I mean, there must be times when like people catch themselves saying something and be like, shit, that did.
But they might not have the skill, the knowledge. So I'm being a bit self-reflective here and that going a bit right.
I guess
they don't have the backup knowledge, the psychology, the reflection to put it together and go, fuck yeah, I've been wrong there. It's right. So they're out here feeling a bit funny, but they don't have the stuff to back it up. And then people stay in the dark.
And I guess especially if it's not something that you're smacking your wife around.
Because
if it's just something about you,
isn't it? When you get physical, and I think that
I think physical is an obvious one. I think everybody can identify that's abusive. But if you're doing other things like what you're saying is abusive, you might not pick up on it. Because
I mean, you could just be particularly mean at times. I think for some people, but then where's that line between
abuse,
being angry and mean with someone?
Sorry, I just have to say, I think I just burped. Hopefully the mic won't pick it up.
It will definitely will, but I mean, don't
worry. We'll make sure that we ramp it up.
Excuse me.
Just be like, that'll be your only contribution to the podcast. All this lovely discussion we've been having. We're like, get that soundbite on. I want that on the trailer.
This is going on Instagram, TikTok.
We're going to blackmail. Look,
just like
Curly Wordy. We've got a
invoice.
Belching.
To be honest, I don't actually edit out much of the podcast.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Usually I'm the one who says dumb shit.
Back to what you were saying. So I was given this great opportunity to me, and I was invited in by this Traumascape. There was 7 of us, different people that had been affected by different types of abuse. Everyone there had been affected by one type of the abuse, and I kind of went along because I'd been a child that had been affected by watching emotional abuse and verbal abuse, and actually it's proven now that you can. There's something called ACEs. I don't know if you know about ACEs. It's the Adverse Childhood Experience Score.
I haven't heard of
No. There's that you can look it up, and you basically there's sorry, that sounded like you can look it up, but you can look it up basically, and people should, because it's a short survey that you take, and you can work out what your ACE score is, and it's your adverse childhood experience score. And what they now prove is that if you witness things, like say you're a sibling that witnesses a domestic abuse or the abuse of a sibling or the physical abuse of someone, it can be just as damning as if it's happening to you anyway. So witnessing something traumatic can alter your brain just as much.
I mean, I guess it would be the stress and the fear and that kind of, because it's the environment, as you say, that, it's that ACE. Environment of
ACEs, ACE, and then a small S.
The first childhood experience questionnaire for adults.
And I scored quite high on that when I did it. Mine was about 5 or 6, and I was like, and there's a really good book called Childhood Disrupted: How to Change Your, how to understand your biology and your biography and how to heal. Because I went through a phase where I read a lot of books where it was about solution. I knew enough to know that what I'd been through, but I wanted to know actually what are the solution points on how you can make this better. Because it's okay, that idea of, I think a lot of people out there, sometimes there's this idea, this taboo around the word victim. Yeah, but we've all been a victim of something, and in a way, it's almost like
that South Park episode with Harry and Meghan, where it's like they kind of want to turn it into part of a brand almost.
Yeah, because it's like, but you're almost, it's ridiculed a bit, and it's tabooed a bit for you. Like people go, stop being a victim. I'm sorry to be an American there. Why are you being a victim?
That's an interesting.
It's also something people capitalise on as well as victimhood concept as well. But it's very difficult because there's the genuine article, which is most people have been a victim of something.
And it's okay to say I have been a victim of that, and it felt shit, and it made me feel terrible. But and sometimes for a while, people do need to wallow in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
People want to stamp their feet and get angry, and sometimes it's because they just want someone to say, "Fuck, that must have been really shit."
Yeah.
And often we don't get that. Often we're not met with that from a parent, right?
Yeah.
But so when you go to a therapist, all of a sudden you're in this safe space, and I guess what you were saying earlier about men is hard because men feel like it's not masculine to be emotional. So to get a man to go to therapy,
it's like if you're too emotional or if you're not emotional enough, it's just finding.
But I think it's the way society treats you. I know there's a big push for men's mental health, but in terms of society, I don't feel like we're there yet in terms of supporting men.
No,
I feel like we say it's good to support men through mental health, but when it actually comes to it,
if you get arrested, it's the most sexist environment. You are instantly guilty by association of having a penis and being accused of anything.
Yeah, you are right. I think that it's hard to be able to know what you can and can't show of yourself. And I remember when I used to talk to my dad and be like, why do you think that you and Mum didn't get on? And I remember he was always
clearly got on a bit, otherwise you wouldn't be here.
Well, exactly. But it's interesting you say that, because I went through life and I never saw what they saw in each other, because all I saw them do is argue.
Yeah.
And so what you're saying earlier, I know we've gone off the point, but it did affect my relationships for a long time, because it's like I didn't trust. Boys weren't safe to me. I always remember, and again, it might not have just been my parents' scenario, it might have been the birthmark thing as well, but I remember being a teenager, and for some reason, boys just didn't seem safe. Cockney boys, because obviously my dad was really Cockney as well. Yeah, most people feel that way about Cockneys.
Especially in my class,
they didn't, and it was, and I was really late going into all the birds and the bees, and by the time I did, I can't say I really understood the rules of courting and the rules of the birds and the bees, and I don't
know how the hell I've ended up with a girlfriend.
But I've had all of the situations I've been in have been really good in their own capacity. They've been learnings, believe me. But there's a point where I don't think I've ever met my match. I've never met an equal. I've never met someone as dynamic as me. And I don't mean that in a big-headed way, but just someone who's got a breadth of skills. And I feel like there was always like this lag, and I was always like trying to fix.
A bit smarter sometimes.
Do you feel like that was impacted by your parents' relationship?
Yeah, I think that it was impacted in the sense that I never saw examples of real love. And I don't think I never saw my parents hug. I never saw them kiss. I never saw them.
I've never seen my parents
console each other.
But the thing is, they probably were in love at some point.
They have to have been, otherwise, I mean, probably.
And when my mum met my stepdad, who she was with up until she died, they never remarried. My mum never remarried, but he was like my stepdad. He was much more affectionate. But even then, you'd only really see them hug or have a little smooch.
It's probably because you're in front of the kids, kind of thing. It's a bit awkward.
Maybe, but my mum was very loving, but she wasn't a big affection giver like that. She herself, and so I think between the pair of them, they'd grown up in a culture. And again, Gabor Mate, not to plug him, but his new book, The Myth of Normal, he talks a lot about. Part of the problem is the toxic culture that people grow up in. So how can you expect your parents to be any different than the culture that taught them?
True, and also it's like cause that's conditioned them as well, and therefore it's kind of the way that life is, and that's how one does things. It's a bit like Victorian culture.
It's a different time though.
But then they had that whole underlying thing of the Victorians invented BDSM. Pretty much them and the Germans, but I mean, because you had that whole sort of one should court, but then afterwards spanking for everybody. Bravo! You mentioned earlier though before we kind of interjected that was
interjected with some spanking.
You're so lucky. Great. I'm so glad I got my notepad. You said that you met people and the whole breadth thing, and then you just as we mentioned, you said there was always something to fix.
Yeah, it felt that way, and I think it's because my mum was a big empath and a big fixer.
Yeah.
My mum was a fixer of communities. My mum always reached out to
matriarch.
She reached out to people. I grew up with a lot of people that were lovely, but people had problems. There was people that were experiencing severe domestic violence on my estate, and some people, there were a couple of people on that estate were definitely drug mules, like gangsters, moles kind of things. My mum was someone. The one credit I give my mum is she always fucking worked. And it was like she always wanted to instill that model to me and my sister that if you want to have nice things, you've got to work. Right. So both me and my sister had a job. My sister worked in a burger shop and I worked on a market stall, But my mum was a fixer, a rescuer. And I think that when my family started to have some issues, I look back and there was a big part of me that was the nurturer. I think back to the birds, think back to the worms I was from.
Yeah.
I was a nurturer. I was always with dolls and, and... I
like the fact that beforehand we were talking about how she shot them first. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. She'd eat them, But so yeah, you're right. I my self-worth came from feeling like that I had to almost offer a man improvement.
Yeah,
it's almost like this is how you can improve yourself. Yeah, this is how you mend your wound.
Did you not find that there were people who you wanted to grow together with? Because that's kind of the ethos that my girlfriend's installing in me at the moment. It's kind of that whole thing of no one's perfect, but we want to grow together, and that's why I'm not vaping this episode.
Yeah,
I gave her my vape.
She doesn't like your vaping.
Oh God, I am so on edge.
I'm not a fan of the vape.
No.
I'm like, if you're gonna smoke a cigarette, smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, but it tastes like shit. Like a man.
Like a man.
It's like, fuck you with purple berry. And it's delicious.
What are all these names for these vapes though?
Well, it's like
I see people queuing up for pink lemonade.
Yeah. It's like they feel like it's advertised.
It tastes like yellow lemonade. So weird. But who gets offended by that?
It feels like it's advertised to kids with all kiddie flavors.
Definitely, yeah.
It's weird.
And
I mean, smoke a cigarette or don't smoke.
Well, yeah, because that's the whole thing with smoking is that if you smoke a cigarette, it tastes like shit, but you're in it for the habit. It's a hardcore habit. But when you're smoking,
I've never vaped actually.
Vape, it's too easy.
I don't like the vape. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because
it's interesting. Yeah. You're probably right. It doesn't feel right in terms of the
inhalation.
Yeah.
I've got like a little nicotine tablets there, and that's how I'm trying to kind of wean myself.
Smoke a vape.
Yeah.
The vape thing. I kind of enjoyed it. I'm just going to say.
Did you smoke cigarettes beforehand?
Yeah, I went through a very stressful period, and then my cigarettes. I used to smoke maybe 5 a day. 5 a day, sorry, 5 a week.
But now he's he's constantly puffing on the vape.
Yeah, it was
like a pacifier.
It was
like a dummy in his mouth.
It was unreal.
Constantly puffing and puffing.
And
is that better for you?
No, it's like when you're doing it at night, and like I'd have.
You're doing it at times you would not smoke a cigarette. So why are you doing it?
And I'd be sitting there, but the worst one would be like I'd be in bed, and my girlfriend goes to sleep earlier than I do, and she'd like wake up to me. At 1 a.m, and it's like, what am I doing to my body? And
you have to be careful, I guess, because back in the day, do you remember when they said smoking was good for you?
Yeah, the T-zone. Hit that thing with my...
Because they say vaping's better than smoking, which it probably is. But if you're constantly 24 hours a day, if you're 24 hours a day puffing away on this little thing,
and also that
how can it be better?
Yeah. And I did note that one of the main reasons I gave it up was because my cholesterol was 6.5, and it can't be anything higher than 5.
Yeah,
and I'm 34. If I've got a 6.5 cholesterol, that's bad. But my diet's reasonable.
Causing that?
Exactly.
The vape.
So yeah, the doctor did say the first thing he said was get rid of the vape, and I was like, all right, fine. And we had Holly on, and she was like, throw it out, and then my girlfriend as well. I mean, there's a lot of peer pressure going on, but
I guess I know this sounds grim,
that's the thing.
But it's almost like society has to come up with something that will kill some people off early, because the population is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. Where are all these people going to go?
Well, what are we at? 8 billion?
I realise I've stolen that. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of Alan Watts.
Not really.
Alan Watts. Oh, what a philosopher he is. He's dead now, but what a philosopher. And he, if you think, he talks a lot about, like, we're finding cures for this cancer and that this heart disease and this cure for this. He said, but then what happens when there's like overgrowth of population? Like where's the dilemma then? I would beckon anyone to look up Alan Watts. It's phenomenal stuff.
It's got a cool pipe.
He's dead now, but he was almost like the layman. He's almost like the pimp of philosophy. Yeah, he pimps philosophy for you to understand.
He does look quite cool. We just had a quick Google of him, and he's got the hair.
Yeah,
he's got the philosophy hair.
He's mind blowing. Like if you listen to something he theorizes about, you're like, oh my god, I can't believe he's said it that way, and those moments of like.
Yeah,
you get them from Alan Watts.
All right,
you're like,
I'll look that up as well. All right, Alan Watts is going on the list.
It's like when most people are sitting like watching Strictly Come Dancing at the weekend. I'm like listening to Alan Watts or
definitely more sophisticated than the other
podcast about the history of Palestine.
Yeah,
I'm
go to sleep
things.
to the history of World War II. Like they've got a new one coming out on Netflix last Thursday, and way to go date recording. But my girlfriend was just like, she sent me an email with it. I'm like, you don't even have Netflix. She's like, that's my Netflix. She's like, who's excited? And I'm like, me. Little birds.
That's sweet.
Got my gin and tonic ready, especially.
It's amazing that I think any philosophers for me are quite amazing. But he's someone that I would recommend to people, and I could go to sleep with him talking.
Oh yeah, I tried listening to one of those podcasts that sends you to sleep.
Yeah,
it irritated the shit out of me. I couldn't do it. I mean,
they sent me to sleep in like 5 minutes. Have you ever listened to Calm?
Yeah,
my god, I'm off.
She was like, try it now, and I'm always a bit skeptical about these things. I'm always a bit like, because ADHD, I'm just like bouncy, especially at night. At night time, that's when I'm awake. Like all morning, sluggish as shit. 4 a.m, fuck yeah, let's go. 2 a.m, why now? I'm one of those people. It's not even overthinking. Sometimes it's just sitting there. Anyway, the point is that we tried one of those. I think he made a grammatical error in what he was saying or something like that, or he mispronounced something.
And you're like, ding!
I was like, oh, fuck no. I was like, sitting there, I was like, looking across and she's just conks. And I'm like, have you heard this bullshit? So that's it, I'm writing a letter.
That's like, What was that show where you could write in?
Oh, Jim will fix
Anne Robinson used to. What was it called? Point of View.
Points of View. Yeah.
Remember Point of View?
Yeah, it was like
where
Twitter.
People would just be everyone's right to complain, wouldn't it?
Yeah, just writing in the Prime Minister's.
Yeah,
we
know. Yeah. It was like Twitter, wasn't it? Yeah. It was like the modern day Twitter when people would just complain. Oh, you can't beat TV from the 80s though.
There's that charm to it. It's that innocence almost.
That's borderline, I think. Yeah. And there's still stuff out there that I think is too sexualized for young teenagers, and it just shouldn't be available. Yeah. But it's like there's so much.
It's kind of
freedom on the internet is scary.
Yeah, they say with porn, the impact that has on your brain as a young person.
Oh yeah,
and even these young people are not going out meeting like people anymore. They're just on the internet.
Yeah,
just watching
and getting the wrong idea of what relationships are.
I think that part of that is though that like it's almost like kind of ordering food in, but for sex and getting sex when you're like. As a teenager, I mean, that was hard work. Even as an adult, hard work.
And also,
you had to spend money on them.
You did have to go and meet people, and you're taught
improve yourself a lot.
And also, I guess because you're male and I'm female, there's a different perspective there, isn't there?
Perspective versus the emotional. Yeah.
Well, I never came into contact with any of that stuff, and I was very, like I said, late to the game with Birds and the Bees, and I was, in a way, like journalism, when I got into it, it was almost like I got married to it. Yeah. It almost became the thing that gave me pleasure.
You can't, it's the tick.
And I think because I can't put it all on my parents, but because I didn't see a happy example of a loving relationship, I don't think I craved relationship. You hear some stories,
isn't it? And if you're not sure what that looks like, and someone comes up to you, holds your hands,
some people crave it to a point where they're over needy, or not over needy. That's the wrong word because
I think people need
negative word. Need.
I know exactly what you mean.
They're overbearing.
They almost seek it out. I need it. I went the opposite way, and I was like, I don't need any of that.
Yeah, I was exactly the same as well. I don't have a memory of my parents being together, so I know how that feels going into your adulthood. Now going into relationships and not having that experience,
not having that blueprint, and
I don't know. And then separation between church and state, so to speak, because it's like what happened behind closed doors was closed doors, and I think our parents, they're loving, but and my mum hugs a lot. My dad's quite, I wouldn't say he was affectionate, but you see videos of me as a kid, and he's playing with me all the time, and I think we had a very healthy childhood. The idea of, as far as I'm concerned, my brother and I are immaculate conceptions. That's it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know about it.
You never walked in on your parents.
I've never. If I have, and I've repressed that one really well. I hope. I know that they would have had a sex life, obviously, because hello. But equally, and they're still in a happy marriage, so something's got.
That's a weird question, that, isn't it?
Even one time, I remember my mum whispering something dirty in my dad's ear on his birthday. He was like, "So what's my other present?" And mum goes, "Who?" And whispers in his ear, and we don't know what she said. But my brother and I looked at each other, and I think the childhood memory burned in there. And my dad just started smiling like a fucking teenager. And I think at that point, I think I black out at that point. It's just like, but so obviously it's nice that they're flirting and that they're affectionate and stuff, and it's nice objectively, but as a son, fuck no. I
guess that can be weird, can't it?
It's beyond. It's.
I guess that's the one benefit of your parents breaking up young. You were spared that, weren't you?
Well, yeah.
I was spared that. I never saw any of that.
I think it's sweet though. I think it's good to have that relationship, but and that partnership is very clearly there, and I think that's important. But I'm talking to two people who don't have parents that are still together.
Interesting, because it's harder, I guess, with a blended family, a bit what they term blended family now. Like that's when your parents either remarry, and then obviously there's other siblings involved, or sometimes people move in, don't they, together, and that can be hard.
I hate that. The idea of hearing someone railing my ex. No, it's a no. I mean, it's like all right, especially if you're the guy, if you're the one that got cheated on or something.
No, I don't mean like that. I mean that blended families. I mean, so say my mum. This never happened, but say my mum and stepdad had moved in together and he had kids. Right. Those kids would have come to live with us. So we were a blended family because.
Oh, I see.
You mean like stepbrothers?
Yeah, you got stepbrothers.
Yeah. So you would have to accommodate. You have to kind of accommodate.
Sorry, I'm going to stop drinking. I'm sorry. This is where the podcast goes. This is where we start getting complaints. It's like she's talking about childhood trauma, and all this guy's doing. We got one for about innuendos as well.
Yeah, one person was like, I couldn't stand it in the windows.
Yeah, it's the innuendos from the middle guy. I wish it's just awkward and cringe. And I mean, I wrote back to Marlon.
Couldn't listen anymore.
I had nothing. I was like, you know what? Fair enough. I apologise. I genuinely do. I didn't mean it, but it was kind of fun.
But so I think blended.
Sorry, go on.
That's all right. So blended families. I never lived in one, but my stepdad and mum moved in together when I'd left for uni, so I'd never. Because interestingly, like going to uni for me was like and I loved my mum, I did, but my sister, without going into details, because that's her story, she had like early mental health struggles, and again, I think in ways where I suspect me and my sister could potentially both be neurodivergent, but not
so
at all.
In what way? So what do you think you have, and what do you think your sister has?
Again, it's not really my place to say with my sister, but we've had conversations recently where we both can identify with aspects of ADHD. My sister we both have hyperactivity of the mind, in the sense that when I'm really in the thick of that, I'll have notepads everywhere with stuff written on it. Like, I went through a phase where if I was coming up with poetry ideas, I'd write on the back of a receipt.
Right.
And
I did that. I used to do that. Yeah.
My sister had hyperactivity of the mind, where she suffered from going through life. She suffered from quite high functioning anxiety, so she would get health anxiety and stuff like that. And so when that played its part, the hyperactivity meant it never switched off. And we both have traits of inattentiveness, where like I'm worse. I can just and what I notice about myself is often listen to people. I don't always get eye contact. I do. I'm an eye contact person, but if I'm really enjoying, like there was a point where I used to go and watch Q&As when I was a journalist. I used to enjoy watching people being interviewed, and I went to the BFI.
It's a good part of the training.
Yeah. I used to go to the BFI a lot, and I used to watch Barry Norman interview people, and I used to enjoy watching just interesting. Like, I remember watching Don Cullen, the photographer, Don McCullen, being interviewed. Just really interesting people, and I'd often look away and just listen, because sometimes looking and listening was never like
because it's like two things to focus on, and like you find yourself distracted by something.
But then over the years, people would then think I was being rude.
No, I was the same thing.
Away.
So what I want to ask now is, Les, you've been diagnosed with ADHD. Is there any steps that Lou can take to maybe get a more better understanding of this condition? Or
Well, I'd recommend the way I discovered about it was that I went on ADD Attitude, who I now write for.
What they call, ADD?
ADD Attitude.
Okay.
And they do like a little test. There's one for women as well, because I know that there's more inattentive symptoms in women. Just gives you a good idea. It's not an official thing, but it's equally not one of those BuzzFeed quizzes that like find out which type of ADHD your cat is.
Yeah.
Turns out all dogs have it. I think there's a book that's like all dogs have ADHD, but ADD Attitude was the way I started, and then I started reading about it, and then in fact we were talking I was writing to this guy who commented on one of our posts the other day, and it's quite an emotional moment, because there's a lot of things that start clicking in, and it's very much pieces falling into place, and that's also kind of why, though, I think a lot of people kind of look at it and then relate to it, and that's why we're kind of finding that it's almost like a little bit of a Twitter trend at the moment. But I genuinely think that there is kind of the side of it, like people are forgetful. I mean, I can't, it took me 20 minutes to make a coffee this morning because I kept getting distracted by the laundry and everything like that, and none of it's been finished, but half of it's done.
It's funny. I watched this video the other day of this guy, and it was like a comedy one, because on social media,
most comedians have
got lots of people doing.
I know that Ed Byrne has it, for example. Yeah, he just found out.
It's like this guy, and he takes his washing from one side of the room to the other, and then to the other side, and then he tidies up one cupboard, and he stands there and he's like dancing because he's achieved something. And I'm like,
it's the finishing blow. It's fucking impossible.
When you're completely overwhelmed, at the moment, I'm living out of boxes and laundry bags and things like that. Yeah. It's discombobulating, but I can hold it together. There's a side to me that's very when I'm really clear on stuff, I've got a place for everything.
I can tell you exactly what
I label a box, and that's my holiday box with my plugs and my travel tags and everything. And then there's the other side to me where I'll just have washing on my floor that I've not washed for 2 weeks. So I can be a mucky pup, and then I can be really tidy.
I gamified that by getting the kind of basket I've got it in the same place everywhere I lived. I knew, it's just that perfect throwing the toss distance.
Yeah.
So you kind of, there is that gamification of it, so it's kind of fun to do it.
But I do think that there's a lot of in my role as a play therapist. I
wanted to ask about that actually.
I work.
What's the difference between that? What's the play therapist thing?
Right, so the difference between play therapy and, say, just being a counsellor is most counsellors, correct me if I'm wrong out there, counsellors, I won't be offended, but most counsellors go through a training journey, like level 2, level 3, level 4. Most counsellors, when they do their level 2, level 3, level 4s, they train to work with adults. When you want to work with children, you have to do a level 5, a level 6, or a level 7, which is a master's.
Is that
right?
in addition to? Because I did a level 2.
Well, if you want to be a counsellor with adults, when I trained to be a play therapist, I never wanted to work with adults because for me, a lot of my early traumatic experiences happened to me young. And it wasn't until I got to I was a very old soul, I'd say, and I was very... people, when people go, you've got an old soul, what they actually mean is, in psychology, it's called pseudo-maturation. And often, if you've been forced to grow up quick in your childhood, you've matured, and often you may have taken the role of a parent. Yeah. You may have taken on this maturity. No, I'm fine.
Oh,
just burping. Sorry, I'm like...
No, you're right, don't worry about it. I mean, I think
I should try and do a bit of beatboxing down
we'll deal with it in post.
But,
right, Marlon?
But yeah, so the play therapy for me, I'd had 10 years working as a teacher. You had to show extensive experience of working with kids. Yeah, and then I.
Also, there's nothing worse than when you write down, I just want to work with kids. Oof.
Well, children,
as a bloke.
Teaching has been brilliant. Teaching for me was a bridge over troubled water.
Do you find it quite cathartic?
It was at the time, and it allowed me to exercise a lot of my creativity. I used to do early years because I love child development and play with the kids, and they were just smart, really fun. You're not going to get any bullshit with kids. You get pure honesty. Fun bullshit. Yeah. But when I trained as a play therapist, I realised I just wanted to help I didn't want to help a class of 30. I wanted to help the few that struggled. I wanted to have greater impact for the few. So play therapy is... a lady called Virginia Axline came up with principles where children, the natural form of expression is play. So children, and this is very true, if a child experiences a traumatic experience young, they don't have the cognitive skills or the language acquisition or the articulation to turn around and say to you, you know what, that thing that happened has really thrown me. That thing that happened has really hurt me. I'm angry, I'm rageful, I just want to hurt something. Instead, they'll internalise it. So play therapy allows children to come into a safe space. I provide a multitude of tools. I offer them clay, sand tray, which is all based in Jungian psychology. I offer them art in terms of paint and drawing. I offer them model making. I offer them dress up, movement, instruments.
Do you not offer them any electronic kind of toys?
I offer them. Yeah, I've done. Yeah, I offer them. I can do laptop and we can do Minecraft. Play Minecraft.
Yeah, but it's basically like Lego but infinite.
Yeah, and you basically allow them to pick what they want. So when you're in the room with a child, you have to resume the permissive role, and they are the person that leads in the room. So you have to allow them to trust you to a point where they will then start playing out the things that have upset them, and that's where you meet them. So when they say, well, so I use a lot of sand tray, and a lot of other therapists out there will know it's an effective tool. So you provide them a sand tray, and the origins of sand tray state that the sand tray you provide must always have a blue base, because the blue base represents the deep, the iceberg. Does it matter?
Is there a specific shade of blue?
No, it just has to be a certain kind of blue. And it represents the deep. And some people believe that, as sand tray theorists, Jungian analysts, they'll believe that the more of that blue that the child shows, like the more of the sand they move, the more of the blue that they reveal is indicative and symbolic of the depth that they're showing you of their injuries. Or
they're trying to build a really tall castle.
Exactly that as well.
Because I mean, there's also that part, because it's like if you want to build a big heap of castle,
and it's all hearsay. Yeah, so you can only ever go based on observation, and you can only ever make certain observations, and you can never be certain on anything unless the child says something. But I've had children before that will say to me, something has happened, and I'll go, oh, that must have been really frightening for you. Like, do you think using these sand tools and symbols, you can show me in the sand what that felt like? And so I provide them a series of small figurines, and I have everything: animals, vegetation, trees,
the early
nature.
learning centre loves you.
Well, boot sales and charity shops, yeah. But you know, I've got to the point when I believed in it so much because actually the training healed me, you know, and I realised as a woman at the time, I'm 42 now, at the time when I trained, it was 2017, so I was in my late 30s, and I had spent my entire life mastering language, mastering my professional career, learning to present myself well, learning to manoeuvre in the world well. I've travelled backpacked solo to most countries I've wanted to go, but I never ever acquainted myself with my emotional self because I was frightened to hold the vulnerability because I'd been taught young that emotions were weakness. Back to the man stuff, what you were saying.
But the whole sort of, but it's interesting that you said, because I mean, like thinking back to what you were saying before as well, like how language and, you know, like the exploration of those interests and all those broad things and everything.
It was personal development for me. It was massive personal development. It seems to be like
an outward. Would you say it was an outward form of expressionism, and then you've kind of in your later career, like with the play theory, like
I was ready. Yeah.
Or...
So you're right. Yeah, the journalism was the first stage of it. Well, actually, no, the bike riding was the first stage, complete freedom. And I've got memories of riding in the rain. Yeah, riding in the rain and being so elated and happy.
Yeah.
Journalism, I wasn't ready to look at my own story, so I deflected and shone a light on other people's, and by understanding
the most emotional ones are the easiest ones, aren't they?
Yeah, but actually by understanding other people's plights, what I was drawn to is that it's that cup half full scenario. I wasn't drawn to the sadness. I was drawn to the fact that they made good. I was drawn to the fact they got out.
It's the journey.
That they healed. And so by listening to all these stories of triumph, I eventually felt brave enough to look at my own. But it still took years, like journalism, and then I came out of a long-term relationship with someone who I really loved, and I guess looking back, he did me a favour, and he'd probably say the same. And we're now friends. You know, he's married with kids, but I loved him. You know, and when he ended the relationship with me, I decided to go to Australia because I'd always wanted to visit.
I heard something similar in Asia, yeah.
And then outdoor therapy, travelling, isn't it? Became a therapy for me, like everything. There's a poem, I rarely share it, but there's a poem called Photosynthesize Me. And there's, and I talk about how nature was therapy for me, you know, but it made me realise that I had to backpack a different map of my own, which was my internal map, you know. And so when I came back from Australia by force of hand, because my mum was ill she'd just been diagnosed with a very rare cancer, and it was chemo resistant, so, you know, in the end it became terminal. When she died, it was then that I was like, all I can remember thinking is, I don't want to feel this way anymore. If I can manage anything else in my life, why can't I look at this shit? Why can't I face this emotional stuff and just know that however messy it gets, I'll hold it. I'll be able to hold it for myself. And when I signed up for the therapy course, I remember saying to myself, making a pact to myself, whatever happens, you're going to get through this. Whatever comes up, you're going to greet it with affection. You're going to hug it.
Something similar, because I was trying to learn to listen better, which is an irony. So I became a therapist. I did the similar thing, but I learned about active listening and things like that.
Have you been to therapy before this?
Yeah, loads. Like, honestly, I mean, I think just from off the back of what happened with my ex back in 2018.
So for you, therapy is a positive thing. How about yourself?
I mean, it's all more like a sort of check-in, check-up. You know, it's a bit like you go to the doctor if you have a cough.
I've done therapy as well.
Was it effective for you?
What kind? I found the counselling was easier.
Yeah.
Or not easier, but more effective when it comes to sort of traumas.
For me, it doesn't work for me, I don't think.
Why didn't it work for you, do you think?
Because it feels like it makes me feel helpless. It makes me feel like too vulnerable, I guess, maybe. And I guess
that's the fear part.
Yeah.
That's the
so in that room with that safe adult, they've got you to a stage where you feel helpless and vulnerable. That's the stuff to sit with. It's not the stuff you're talking about. It's the fact that the feeling is that you feel helpless. That's the thing to peel back.
And I guess the
what is it about being helpless that you don't like?
And I guess the major issue for me is like, it will put me in a bad mood for days.
Do you feel vulnerable when you're helpless?
It does. It's like
I guess it'll bring up all these emotions, and it'll make me in a down mood. And I feel, for me, it's not positive for my life. I'd rather do things that make me feel good than do something that I don't look forward to it. I don't look forward to bring up emotions.
Yeah.
And now I feel shit for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and that's a fair point.
It's like surgery. I mean, like, if you've got something that's under your skin and you're like, well, I can't see it, it doesn't matter. But then you kind of go in there and you just hoik it out, and then all of a sudden you start to feel better over time, not necessarily.
I guess in the long run,
it's emotionally exhausting.
I think for me, I got to a point where I literally hit roadblocks. So like, you're right. Like, I went through I've since met people, like, I lived in Australia for 3 years, and like, even recently a friend visited and we went out and had a lovely meal, and she said to me, Lil, I never realised all this was going on for you in Australia, So you're right in many ways, Marlon, that you get to a point where if the stuff you've been through when you're young, your ACEs, your traumatic experiences, the weighing scales aren't imbalanced, so actually, yes, that happened, but I'm all right. And I'm thriving and I'm positive and I'm enjoying this stuff. You ain't got to look at it. But if ever you get to a point where it starts to actually weigh different, and this shit is affecting me to a point where it's impacting all my relationships, or in fact, with my mum's died, and now I remember when my mum died, I was like, fuck, I'd realised how much of a mask I'd worn to be. I'm the sibling that's got it all together. Yeah, I'm the sibling. I've got it. Yeah, I study and I'm successful, and I'm all right. Yeah, I'm not a fuck up, and I'm not saying anyone in my family was a fuck up, but I think because my sister had anxiety and some mental health issues that was wrongly diagnosed. She was told she had depression. She didn't. She was told, I think, and she was put on the wrong kind of pills. But through my family, no one spoke about it. So it was almost like a bit of a madhouse. Like, there was all this stuff going on, and it was almost deemed normal. When of course it wasn't normal. And this is what I'm saying to you, that's when you don't realise you've come from something abusive, or you've come from something unnormal. And I remember my sister saying to me, nothing wrong with my childhood, and you'll meet tons of people that go, my childhood was great, nothing wrong with me. It's hard, but fucking hell, it built me. Well, I mean, when you actually strip the layers off, well, no, actually that thing that you witnessed was terrifying, was it not? But you've got to, you take those layers off and just sit with that feeling, and you're very right. I've had nights where I've shaked. I've like had tremors where I've been like, oh my God, I remember that. And rather than medicate it, or rather than
touch my jaw,
rather than ignore it, I'd got to a point where I'd done certain type of healing. I'd gone down a holistic avenue of healing, and I'd met people that had put me in and had allowed me to tap into my body, where I carried the stress and why I was getting these pains, and I sat with it.
Can I touch on the holistic healing? What does that involve?
The holistic healing for me started with sound baths. Actually, it started with calm. Listening to meditative stuff, going to sleep, realising how much it calmed me. Then a friend of mine lent me this light thing. I don't know what they're called. They're expensive. From my friend Andy. It was this light thing. It was like a light mask, and it's got all these lights, and you're meant to listen to like some meditative process while it's doing it, and it's meant to like.
Well, with your eyes open.
Yeah, and it's meant to like take it. Like, apparently.
Have you tried it?
I borrowed it. There, it's like a £500-600 mask. I don't know the name of it at all, but it's
£600.
It's meant to do what monks are trying to achieve for years.
Why don't you just get like? Wait,
it's like a light sound mask, I think it's called, Marlon.
We're Googling as we speak, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are listening
and I remember
watching, we are having a Google.
I remember the first time I used it, I was like, the fuck is this? Like, it was like I could see all my neurons and all my wiggly things in my brain and behind my eyes. Like,
that looks a bit like an excessively creepy. Wait, I said that one's really creepy. All right, yeah, but it looks a bit like sort of like a I don't know. Have you seen the one with the face on it?
I'll have to ask him, but there's a technology behind it, and it's to do with like setting the mind straight. like allowing your neurons to almost like reset themselves, and like synapses
neurons
stuff.
aren't necessarily always firing at 100%. Because like with the
some of them
stuff,
fire
like
and wired in the wrong way, didn't they? You know, because they can fire and wire in a way where you can definitely then lean towards a cup half empty, not half full. You know.
True. But the thing is, I was thinking, because it's like, you know, the way that it fires away is like, you know, like when you, for example, one of the things I learned last year was that the more you repeat a hurtful memory, the more it implants into your head.
So what you think is what you create, and you're very right.
And if, when when you dwell on something, it just kind of imprints, and the feeling and the emotional attachment.
And that's interesting, because with my poetry, I got to a point where I was performing certain narratives of my poetry, and I was thinking recently I'd got involved in these different projects. And I've been really fortunate in the projects I've done. And I was thinking recently it's time for new stuff, because those stories are older stories now. It's time for new stuff. So you're right. You can repeat that stuff to yourself.
I've got to the stage where my friends told me to stop telling the same story because it was only hurting me.
Yeah.
And I think Marlon also, you said the same sort of thing. But it was, I realised that it would be 20 minutes of a conversation in which I would go through the same shit. Everyone had heard it already. It's all right, we get it. She's a dick. You know, and you're just like, yeah, but... And it was just me trying to unpick it so it made sense.
I know, because like, talking to you, like, you go over the same stories, like, with your exes, like, over and over and over again.
To me or her?
You.
Oh, but do you know what? What I would say is, do unpick it. And
I tried.
This is the thing. Never believe that you're not good enough to unpick yourself. Right. And this is what the spoken word has given to me. Like, I feel like I've gone through... like a new paradigm of thought. I feel like I've entered a new, like, dare I say, like a vortex of thought, because I've been allowed.
Jesus, we're having a maneuver over here. You know, it's like shit. He's the producer. I can't lose you, Marlon.
But sorry, Marlon, I didn't answer your question. So the holistic stuff, in short, was started with very basic stuff like. A static dance, like silent disco stuff, dancing, moving the body, getting the movement out your body. Then I went to a couple of retreats and I explored what it meant to... Thank you, that'd be lovely. I explored what it meant to operate more in the feminine, because I'd always operated from my masculine energy, because when my father had left, I was, looking back, definitely more of a daddy's girl, and my sister was more for my mum. I loved my mum, but I did love my dad. And I stepped into that masculine role, and I've operated from my masculine for a long time. So I looked at where my energy was imbalanced, and I did a bit of work on my feminine, what it meant to be the feminine maiden and the feminine crone and the feminine mother and the feminine mage. There's stages to the feminine, and it's like a cyclical nature of like nature. So there's a really good book that I would recommend. It's called Women That Run With the Wolves.
Right.
Beautiful. It's a seminal piece of work, brilliant piece of work. Stick with it, because it isn't easy in the start.
It's kind of hard to like.
Beautifully poetic.
Okay.
And then you can find work called, like, there's a really good book I'm reading at the minute called Maiden to Mother, and it's about the mature archetypal stages of life. So what they say is, say you've not been a mother yourself, like I haven't, you can mother yourself. So when women have got the energy to be able to mother themselves, so you can move. The maiden is like, you know, like Robin Hood, like the virgin, the maiden. Yeah. That's the maiden. And when you move into mother, then you move into something called sage, which is like the mage, the wise woman, and then you move into crone, which is the
I like the way they've said sage instead of witch.
Yeah. And it's a cycle. And when
we forgot to ask, do you have children? Or
I don't have children. No. My sister has two beautiful nieces, two beautiful kids, two beautiful nieces. That I can give back when I want. One of them really looks like me, so that helps.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you say that, because now I'm in my early 40s. I'm not saying I would have never done it, but it's the one thing that my mum instilled in me. And Mummisms, my poem Mummisms, there's a line where she says, there's a line where I say...
Before you even go into that, we're going to ask you to do a poem before we...
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But there is a line where she says, oh, fuck. Now don't don't go giving your cake away to any Tom, Dick or Harry, and don't think a girl's role in life is only to have kids and marry. Be a woman who endlessly strives for her goals, and don't be coerced into quenching that unquenchable thirst. And it's this idea that women don't only have to have kids. And now I'm older, I get it a lot. When I went to India, I travelled to India after my mum died.
Asian culture's the best for that.
People would say to me, "What's wrong with you? Where's your husband?
Yeah,
where's your kids?"
My ex-girlfriend was 24 and she would be called a spinster.
That's horrible.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous. It's
I've
like,
been called a spinster
24.
by my aunts. Yeah,
Definitely wasn't one.
I reckon spinsters had the right idea.
I think they went on. Yeah,
You're free.
There's a lot. I mean, yeah.
Should we go back to the holistic stuff? So holistic training. Holistic learning. The masculine, feminine. So you like. There's actually that. I can tell you a couple of retreats. I mean, a friend of mine runs one in Portugal, the Shanti Space. It's a bit of a plug, but they do a men's one as well. So 4 days, and it's called Alchemizing Male. So there's one for men, there's one for women, and I love them. Like I've only ever done 3.
Have you ever like seen a radical change in someone's sort of personality?
I've seen a radical change in me after those, because you give yourself permission to explore parts of yourself that were blocked off by conditioning. So it's unlearning yourself. I went to one that was all about. This sounds more kinky than it was, but it was called. We
love a good euphemism.
It was about Taoism, and it was tantra. It was tantra femininity, and there was 5 or 6 of us. This was in Thailand. I went to this retreat. I've been to 3 in my lifetime, and if I had the money, I'd go to them regularly. But they do cost a.
It does sound like you're about to big up an orgy.
No, it wasn't an orgy, but it was this. It was like honouring the feminine, and you had to look at the different stages of woman that you were, and the different faces of woman. And what I realised is when they asked me to stand up, and they played music, and they asked me to move like the warrior woman, because that's one side of the archetypal woman, I could do it. But when they asked me to be the sensual woman, I couldn't do it, right? And I was very awkward back then. And when I think, like 5 years on, I'm now more fully intact with that sensual woman. So the journey of learning about sensuality has been brilliant, because I started doing that kind of holistic learning. So you owe it to yourself to try and learn the parts of your body that you're not the parts of your personality, or the parts of your sexuality that you're not as comfortable with, because sometimes that is what holds the key, your gender, whatever it is that you define it as. And for me, I always felt like I was operating with very strong energy, and I just wanted to know what the soft loo felt like where had the soft loo gone? Not to be feminine that means soft, but for me, femininity meant just to be a bit softer, So I've done that. I really rate reflexology, like I do it regularly.
Is that where they do your feet?
The feet, where they switch off the pituitary gland. Yeah,
amazing at that. Yeah. It's like £2.
Yeah. Oh no, it's not that cheap for me. But I've done Reiki, so that's more like energy healing. Yeah.
I keep trying to get her to do it on me, because I've had
it's hard to do it because you have to kind of do a course. You need to go to a Reiki.
She's done all that stuff, and then it's just like, but I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I just kind of want to know, because about 5 years ago.
Oh my God, get on that, mate! If your partner is a Reiki healer, you got to get on that shit.
She's so angry at me. She won't. She's like, no. And I'm like, just a question. She's like, stop asking. I'll do it when I'm ready.
But I would say, like, I never knew. I think the thing that I'd say the most is I never knew what any of this stuff really was. All I knew is when I got to a point where I wanted to try it, I thought, what the fuck have I got to lose?
Yeah, well, quite a lot of money.
It's going to make me feel better than what I feel now. Yeah. And I might actually learn something about myself that I never knew. And that was enough. I didn't have to read up. And actually, sometimes I purposely didn't read up.
Yeah, I do.
I went into these things blind, so I wouldn't have any blocks or preconceived ideas of what it was going to give me.
I want to go back to the reflexology thing.
Yeah.
So is there have you done it before? Is there places in the UK that you can get this done?
Reflexology, there's loads. The lady...
I'm not gonna lie, I had a look online, and I was like, there's like little tips you can do for yourself. So I was just looking at... For anybody listening, if you don't know who reflexology, this is your feet. This is specific areas that release certain emotions.
Sorry to go off the point. But I must go back and just finish what I said about that retreat, right? Because what happened at the end of that retreat, like I'd got to know 5 women over like 5 days, and we danced, we laughed, we screamed, we worked. Yeah, it wasn't only, but it was ended up being women. We raged, like it was what they, real fucking holy rage, where you could punch walls and punch floors and do what you want. And
it sounds like
there was there was no drugs. But you were given permission to you were just given permission. And when you start that kind of thing, like I've done 2 retreats like that since. That was my very first one. I was awkward. By the third one, I wasn't at all. I was, But at the end of that retreat, Daisy, the facilitator, beautiful woman, we did this thing.
There's something to them, don't they? Like,
she was like a magical fairy witch, right?
Like,
but we had to do this thing where we each had to bring an offering to our sisters, right? So say like someone bought chocolate, I bought lavender oil, someone bought a feather, no one bought rosé, and we basically in groups took it in turns. You're going to think this is a bit of an orgy, but it wasn't. We got blindfolded.
I'm not dirty.
Right, we got blindfolded. And we laid down, and like a group of, say, like 3 of them, for 5 to 10 minutes, you laid there, you had clothes on, and they basically gave you a sensual experience. Nice. So all of a sudden you'd feel feathers going down your body, or you'd feel like a silk sarong, like, go over your body like this, and then someone came up to you and fed you chocolate, and then someone put like lavender under your nose and went, sniff.
I just laughed my
someone come over and went, eat me, and then gave me a bit of mango.
I'm not going to say it, but like if some girl's coming up,
that does sound a bit like an orgy.
Thank you. I want to make sure that the bar is left where I put it.
It was a food.
A girl comes up to you and goes, "Eat me," and while you're like, tantric moment.
I'd be like, "Oh, my eyes be closed," and as soon as they say that, I'd be like.
No.
Yeah, eat me. Like,
the mango was there. The mango was there on my lip, and she'd open your mouth.
This does sound a little bit like it was going somewhere. Yeah. I'm sorry, but it's like I bet at least 3 of them were.
But then it was a mango, But the ultimate.
Oh yeah, it was a mango. I bet you were so disappointed.
Not a euphemism, but it was a mango, and it was
hope.
Juicy. It was juicy.
We don't judge here. We don't judge. I mean, this does sound kind of like a sensual version of BDSM in a way.
No,
actually,
but what it taught me is that I was like.
So was this in the UK?
This was in Thailand.
Okay.
It was
I bet it was.
No.
I'm sorry.
It was at a gorgeous retreat
I'm
called.
holding back.
It was at a gorgeous retreat called the Sanctuary. It's in Koh Phangan, and it's off the beach. So where you've got the big party that goes on.
Yeah,
right?
Moonlight Party.
Yeah, so you go to that beach and you get a boat, and they take you about 20 minutes, and they take you to the retreat that's called the Sanctuary.
But not in that regard. Like not as.
But I'm not. I'd
love to go again.
Maybe everyone's got their own thing. It certainly wasn't sexual for me, but what it taught me is how to be so in touch with my sensuality. And since then, without going into that realm of sex,
I ain't going nowhere near.
My sensual ability in an intimate relationship now and in a sexual relationship is that much better. And actually it's only when I started to tap into my sensuality that I started to have better orgasms and actually better connection with my femininity. So therefore surely there's a link, because I had closed that off, that femininity.
Is it something like?
It's interesting you went for your chest as well when you describe feminine energy as well. Like,
is it something like?
No, it's true.
I guess like monks will say like the chakras in your body. You have to release some chakras. There's certain chakras that's closed off. Is that something like similar to what you experienced?
I think I've had moments, where I've done chakra healing, and I'm someone who's open to it. Like I can't. How do we ever know what is real and what isn't? Right? Life is a mystery. Like I wake up sometimes and go, "Wow, like this."
I like the idea that there's like different frequencies of visibility, and then like an entire different world that we can't see.
I do believe in energy. Yeah, I do believe in
to cut you
energy healing.
I agree.
What's everybody's opinion on religion here?
Here we go.
Let's start with you.
Number 1.
It's hard, isn't it? Because for me, religion, divinity, spirituality, God, if you like, is the cosmos. For me, science, like the most definite thing is science. That's it. What's out there. A friend of mine used to say that the moon looked like God's torchlight. And it's that to me is a definite. And that's special. That's magical. And Interestingly, growing up, I loved RE, and the secondary school I went to was at the time in the 90s probably 95% Bengali. So we had prayer rooms for Ramadan. I had, like I said, Sikh and Hindu. Loads of the old Czech Republic had come over, and the Somalians were just coming in. And Tower Hamlets taught me I don't like the word tolerant. You know when people say it taught me to be tolerant?
Tolerance.
No, I understood where that came from.
Tolerant doesn't imply that you accept.
It's like you annoy me.
Tolerate.
I see where it came from, because once it was a word okay to use, but it made me. It gave me incredible, like, what's the word, like religious exposure, ethnic exposure.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, exposure. Like, and when I went off to uni, I went to Manchester, so it was quite a lively city. I came into contact with people that had not met anyone that was from any kind of background like that, and I realised it was a plus. It was a plus, you know. So, in answer to that, I grew up around a lot of people that shared their culture with me, and culture for me like that. I used to kind of get involved in, like, when it was Diwali or when it was Eid, I'd wear one of the girls would dress me up in a sari, and I'd get involved in, like, the dance in assembly.
That's fun.
And we celebrated through food. So really I learned about religions through food. But
food is a really interesting part of every religion as well. I find that, you know, like, for example, Onam. My ex was Indian, and like, I loved that. It was her favourite day. It was her favourite meal. And it's such an honour to be a part of that. And I'm not saying that as a sort of like, oh yeah, namaste. I actually genuinely just skip my note over there every Wednesday. But, you know, like, it was great fun. It was just, like, so fascinating to kind of learn all that new stuff and experience all that. Like, I think that links into the religion thing. Is, like, in my opinion, I think that it's something to be explored, not necessarily to be divisive about.
No, it scares me when people are.
It's weird.
You know, it scares me when people are, and it scares me when people still, like, blockade, like, categorise people.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've never seen that. I've never looked, like, I have to share this. It's quite a funny story. When I was 5, going back to my infant school, Mr. Jones, but it wasn't Mr. Jones then, it was Miss Peacock. I think it was like my second day of school.
Mr. Mustard busy.
Right, yeah, Mr. Mustard. Cluedo. I went to school, and my mum came to the school gate to pick me up, and she was like, I loved Kiss Jays, right? You know, I loved the boys.
I was lost at that.
And my mum was like, to, like, Joanne Peacock, where's Louise? And she was like, oh, she's just inside kissing Abdul and Delroy goodbye.
You know, wait, can we stop there? Someone was called Delroy
and Abdul and Delroy goodbye. And I was already, I was like chasing around the boys that were different from me. You know, I was always intrigued by culture. I was always intrigued by diversity and difference, and I still am. And I'm always someone that is mega fascinated. Like, our world has become, like, ethnically ambiguous, hasn't it? You can't tell where anyone's from. You could see someone and you don't know that they're Cypriot, Brazilian.
No, and I think that. But one of the things I was exploring in one of my articles recently was the fact that it's. In fact, it's I was triggered by that ableist racist thing. It's like the thing.
That's awful.
The thing that pissed me off about that was it's like, why the fuck wouldn't you ask?
Yeah.
Like, you should want to be curious about someone else's culture. That's not racist. And, you know, like, you were describing being put up in a sari, and, you know, I heard all this fuss about, you know, like, cultural appropriation. Oh, fuck off. You know, like, if your mate is saying, like, you know, like, it's saying, like, oh, try this. You know, like, I mean, I'm wearing, at the moment in my beard, there is some stuff that my ex, who was African, she gave me to kind of make my hair soft. And you know what? Fucking amazing. If you want to get soft hair, go to an African shop. My God. You know,
I agree
African
with you.
hair
Like,
shop
share it. Why don't we
pick the
share
stuff
it?
that's like really weird, like the weirdest looking shit that you've seen. Smells amazing. Get the lady behind the thing, you know, like behind the counter, because she knows her shit, and, like, you know, like, she'll come along and she'll tell you what to put in your beard, and it'll be better than any of the shit you'll find on Amazon. It's amazing. And
I think it's
not just that, obviously.
No, but you're right. But also,
there are elements of religions, though, that I don't necessarily like as much. Like, a couple of my ex-girlfriends were Indonesian Muslims, and there was this whole concept of haram, which is, you know, that something's forbidden. And I'm like, and whenever someone tells me no, I want to know why. For example, I mean, I'm not applying that to all scenarios, but in general, if it's like you can't go down there, kind of want to know why can't I go down that road? Because there's an ogre in there, it will kill you. Right, not going to go down that road. Why not? Because I said not. I really want to do it now. Why don't you want me to go down there? You know, like, and that becomes about that kind of thing. But I think that when it comes to religion and things, I mean, I was just chatting to a friend of mine. We're being very heavily misrepresented since Brexit, in particular, I think. Is, you know, like a lot of my foreigner friends, they've all been saying, they ask me, oh, is it really racist like it looks? And you know, there is the polarization in the media. Yeah, he was saying, like, you know, he sort of saw that how, you know, there was anti-Palestine counter marches and all that Remembrance Sunday stuff, and he was like, what's going on over there? And as you said, I was like, well, you know, like it's ridiculous, because 99.9% of people can't give a fuck about your religion. Like,
I think
it's fine.
Capitalism is numbing, isn't it? Like,
it's exhausting.
Capitalism is like,
there's no community anymore, and that's one of the things that I find quite scary. Is that these religious, the religion is scary because it creates community, which is power. Whereas if you have an a-religious society, an atheist society, where there is no centre of community, that's why we've all ended up with sort of more, you know, more of us are going to therapists than ever before. We have more depression. We have, you know, cliques and things like that. But it's just, everyone feels a little bit lost, I think.
I think, like, I was thinking this the other day, like, capitalism has almost become like an anaesthetic, you know, and what it does is it numbs people.
Yeah, buy this, feel good for
to the point, seconds. But to the point where, like, the normal rigmarole of, like, you know, wake, work, sleep, eat, work, you know, pay the bills, pay for that, pay for these credit cards, this, you know,
everything's
it's
for
desensitized.
Money.
It's desensitized. I posted a poem really early. I knew it was going to go bad, and then, like, days in, I realised there was this mass triggering going on where everyone was becoming dysregulated because no one actually knew what the fuck were they going to do here. That we're helpless. Well, we can't do fuck all other than go on marches.
It's frustrating.
And you could claim that you're given those marches just to really be quiet.
Did you go on the march?
I went on a couple of them, yeah. And I think that,
what was the atmosphere like?
It was like all marches. Like, I remember going on the Iraq War one, and it was full. Like, you're always a bit worried about. I don't like massive crowds anymore, but it's like people are optimistic, people are hopeful, people are stoic, people are, you know, comrades, aren't they? You know, it doesn't matter if you don't go. Like, some of them I didn't go to, you know, but
I'll confess I've never been on a march.
You've never been.
I think I've been.
You could do like an on-the-spot podcast on a march. That'd be cool. Because where you do off the point, you know, you could go along on a march and it'd be so off the point because you wouldn't know what you'd be getting from
Where
people.
the fuck are we, Marlon? I have no goddamn idea. Who's got the map? She does.
Who was that person we just
run off?
Who knows? Fuck no.
She's had a storm off and we're still filming.
You could do like an off the point special on a march. And it might be quite cool.
That would actually be really good fun.
And people would, you've got the equipment.
Off point outside.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You should consider it. You know.
A couple of people hold the camera. And, you know, I'm happy to chat to people. Yeah, cool.
I do have one of them mics that you hold, you know, like...
I've got like a dictaphone kind of thing.
I do have one of them.
It's not the same. Oh, you need a little fuzzy thing.
Well, yeah, I got them.
Watch this space. Look me up. I'll come and be a cameraman or a mic bird.
Yeah. Although it's like, kind of get your ass off that goddamn thing. We're trying to be professional. Fuck. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go make 6 innuendos about tits to this feminist. So, the Women's March. Free the nipple.
That could be a laugh.
It wouldn't for them.
Well, it usually never is, but... For feminist season, anyway.
Oh,
do you think you can be too much of a feminist?
Yeah, well, definitely.
I'm a feminist, but I do like men.
I think that it's quite interesting that it's the only...
That's the sorry to cut you, Les.
Please do.
I feel like...
Probably saved my ass.
Yeah.
I'll probably say something...
I feel like an extreme... I feel like with extreme... with extreme feminists, it can sort of become anti-men, which is the problem.
Yeah.
I don't feel like...
That's how you feel sometimes,
That's kind of what triggered me, because it's like I ended up in a situation where I was with people who were heavily feministic and were frustrated by men, but I hadn't done anything wrong, and yet for some reason I felt like I was in the wrong permanently.
Yeah.
Even though it really fucked my...
It must be hard. It must not be hard, but like... Especially if you being a white male as well, that must be even like...
I mean, it's not really a race thing as much, but it was more like the fact that I was the only boy in the house.
Because I went to this like diversity.
I'm surrounded by very strong women as well, which isn't any criticism at all, but when your voice, you know, when you don't have another bloke around you as much to relate to, you don't know what is and isn't normal male behaviour. So, but equally, you're just kind of still slightly alien. So it's quite a confusing situation to be in, I think.
A couple of years ago, I went to this diversity training.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's capitalising.
Yeah. That's capitalising on sex. There was like 4 of us in the group, and I think it was like
ridiculous.
1 white woman, 2...
Funny how they've stopped doing those now.
Yeah. Well, I was saying there's 2 black people. One, me being the male, one being female, and then there was one female white woman, and there was one male in the group, and he was just like, oh yeah, he just had to admit to himself, like, oh, I'm
a massive sexist.
I'm privileged, I'm white and I'm male, and that's how I felt like he had to. I thought he was literally apologising for being a white male.
That's stupid, because it's like, I mean, like, we had this situation in one of my old companies, and the guy came, you know, like, it was about, you know, race and stuff like that, and they were talking about, you know, diverse impact, and the guy's wife was black. He was a white guy, you know, leadership area, and his wife, I think, was black or from somewhere else, and he was like, well, to be honest, in our family, like, it's not really been an issue. We've got, you know, mutual respect. We work as a team with the kids, and, you know, my little brownlings, they're lovely. Well, he didn't say it like that, but, you know, like, I think that it'd be your kids and they're brown. I mean, you know, like, there was a comedian as well. He was like, he looks, I can't remember his name, but he looks proper sort of, you know, punk, you know, like skin ahead kind of thing. He's like, and, you know, he said that, you know, people keep coming up to him like, oh yeah, look, brown people around here, and there. He goes, yeah. In fact, they're even in my house. And, like, you know, I'm the only white man in my house, white person in my house.
Do you know, like, but do you know, like, think back to the punks, like, you know, they the subculture, you know, think back to like the mods and the rockers, like, think back to like the Rastafarians, like, think back to the like Lovers Rock, all that stuff, like subcultured stuff was like,
there was a lot of strength.
It gave, there was. It was like togetherness, but like real togetherness, you know.
Now I think
like definition
kind of
of something
that's kind of almost forced on us by people who probably were the ones pinching the asses in the first place.
I mean, I think, like, for me, like, going back to what you're saying about what you were saying, Marlon, about the white guy that was the white apologised for being white privileged. Like, I do think at some point, you know, there'll be more dialogues about whiteness, poor whiteness.
Yeah,
and I think take away the.
I think it's already quite a few.
Take away the wealthy white, and take away the poor white that has got kind of connections with the far right. Just look at the average Joe Blogg who's lived like a common
normal.
Or a common,
poverty is, you know, poverty,
and their white story. And I think that there's an element of that to being, you know, it's interesting because I remember going to a place in Bow, and I performed at this cafe in Bow. I don't know the name of it. Oh, it's called Something Beings. It's a charity. It's a well-known charity. I'm going to forget.
Yeah, it'll come to you.
I forgot.
It'll come to you later. Don't worry. I've been at this for 2 hours.
But this place is. It was full of beautiful examples of like modern day Bengali women that were academics that were sitting there accessing the free library. And we, you know, we were chatting about what it means to kind of tell the common Londoner story. And actually, you've got two parts of it there. You've got the common Londoner, which is the whole breadth of the diverse London, but then you've got the common London that was traditionally back in the day white, because London was more white, and it's okay to tell that story too. But there's a big part of that community that's just gone quiet.
I think there's also the element of gentrification that's come along as well.
But I'd like to. I would like to tell a bit of that story.
Go on.
I'd like to capture it. I'd like to use my. I'd like to like capture use my journalism skill and my poetry and my kind of
really interesting
stuff. Go off and capture it. Just the everyday average Joe, and it doesn't have to be. I guess there's two options there. Yeah,
like, you know, like, there's no such thing as common anymore, really, because it's like the average Joe. Because that's a different. Because I'm thinking, like, you know, when you think East End, you still think Cockney bloke selling, you know, apples and raspberries kind of thing.
But I'd like to record that, and I'm gonna. I mean, for the next 12 months, I won't because of my job with Women's Refuge, but I'm going to see if I can apply for Arts Council funding, and I want to try and capture that story. I might be calling on you going, hey, guys.
Yeah, there's us. We've been called out for another fucking pop podcast. God damn it, it's cold.
It's funny you
Why
say
does you pick days that rain?
But what you just said, it's interesting, because in one of my new piece I'm working on, there's a line where I say, common sense ain't so common, but us common sense that with little resources we truly have to be resourcefully hench, otherwise common becomes common stench. You know, and it's this idea that if you don't act well on your resources, you fester.
Right.
You know,
It's true.
you fester. You know.
So before we wrap up this podcast, I want to double back. So I want
It's
to...
got 2 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Jesus.
The element chatting away.
Yeah. I want to go back
Almost out of
to...
beer.
I want to go back to how you know you have I want to go back to how you know you have dyslexia. What process did you do?
What the fuck kind of double back was that? You go full circle. You don't just rip into the
I don't know. I don't know, but I know. And I think
I was assuming that you did some sort of maybe online test.
No.
The reason why I asked you this question is because yesterday, in fact, when I was at work, I was like, maybe I'm dyslexic because I always struggled with my spelling. I always struggled with English. English was my worst subject. I got every other subject straight away, but English I struggled the most with. I struggled to read. I struggled. I struggled to this day. So that's the reason why I was like, maybe I'm dyslexic. Listening to the Holly episode I was listening to this week as well. I was just like, maybe.
She's very inspiring. So,
yeah. So for anybody listening, Holly is the surgeon that with ADHD and dyslexia on our podcast.
Yeah.
So I'll just...
I can't be certain I have, but I feel like I know I have.
Okay.
I often spell things wrong. I often get letters in the wrong way.
So
Me and my mates got to a point where they laughed so much about my lack of ability to check my texts and how I'd always get them wrong that I started sending texts that were spelt wrong to see if they could read between the lines.
So I have that problem.
Wait, you used to test your mates by sending them dodgy texts?
I have that problem.
They'd have to read between the
4 in the afternoon. No, but the thing is, 2 in the morning. Are you drunk or are you being a bitch?
No, they'd get it.
So I have that problem as well. So what I've done,
One-eye texting. Actually, what's it like to be dyslexic? One-eye texting. Sorry.
So what I have this problem. I have the same problem like at work and even in my personal life. So I got this. I think we spoke about it on the Tower episode where I have this app called WordTune on my phone and on my computer where I can just put in a sentence the way I would put it in my gobbledygook.
Okay.
And then it sort of restructures it into like proper English.
Wait,
brilliant.
So it's almost like you kind of like translate what you want to say and it comes out in corporate.
Yeah.
That's quite funny.
Yeah, it gives me like 5 or 6 options of what I want, so I just select the right one, and then I use it for emails. I use it for sometimes text.
My mate's been using ChatGPT.
I don't. It does have AI software incorporated in it. So that's what I do in terms of like communicating.
It's a lot of these tools in there. Like, I mean, do you?
It's helpful. It only costs me £14 a month.
Wow. But I would definitely like once if what's interesting, having been a teacher, like because I was early years for years, I'd often suspect that some children were dyslexic, and you could never put them forward for a test before they were 4 because it was too considered too
you can't
young.
write anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, but often they would say, even when a child is 7 or 8 and you send them for a dyslexia test, he's like, fucking hell, the wine's gone.
He's absolutely out of it.
Marlon's like, Jesus, he's
Evil,
shocked.
it's
He's
on him.
shocked.
Oh yeah. I bought my beer as well, bless.
I remember I've done that a few times. I've gone, Jesus.
Yeah,
You know what? I mentioned
I did that
before.
on Wednesday. I was a bit like, well, I should probably not be doing. Like it's like
We actually stopped drinking when we record our podcast.
Yeah.
We did it for the first
those
5
really boring episodes.
We did it for the first 5 episodes. We did it for the first 5 episodes, and then we stopped drinking when we were recording until this is the first season back that we started drinking again. It's like season 3.
I actually got a job because of that one that we did on drinking, and it's me just it's drinking's terrible. Like you're absolutely pouring it.
Yeah. I mean, you still drank, but I stopped drinking until now.
Yeah, you did about 6 months, didn't you?
Yeah.
Really
So the whole season 2, I didn't drink. Most of season 1,
I lasted 10 days when I tried to quit drinking.
Yeah.
Did not go well. I think it's the part that got me fired.
With the teaching, even when kids are at 7. Right, and you could put a child forward for a dyslexia test, and what you'll get back is could be dyslexic. So sometimes you never get a definite. So that's why some people just don't go for it.
Yeah, that's why I have for ADHD. I got flagged as a child. It's like could be ADHD. My mum was like, "Well, this person's diagnosing every kid they see with ADHD. And there's money for it."
Yeah.
So there's and then the other person said I wasn't, and then just, lo and behold, turns out it would have been a lot easier. But equally, I don't think I'd have had the same life, and I would have been as happy.
As you know, I've worked with a lot of kids that have had early trauma, and actually some children, especially in boys, you get to the age of like 7, and a lot of the traits of ADHD can also be identified as
CPTSD.
Yeah,
I think I had a mix too from.
So that's why it's difficult, and even like a friend of mine today. Again, it's not my place to say, but she's quite proud that she's got the diagnosis. She's training to be a therapist. She was a teacher. She's just been diagnosed as ADHD. Her son's got it. Her husband's got it.
She got the same thing. She got.
And they're realising that her brother's probably got autism. Her dad probably had it. And it's this, and like you say, it's this liberating moment of like.
Well, your dad have ADHD?
No, I don't. We don't know because he's 72,
I doubt it.
But there are little things that I've noticed that used to really piss me off. If he goes in a supermarket, he gets super annoyingly anxious. We went shopping the other day, and all I wanted was I wanted to make sure I got the right thing, and he's 70 something, and he threw a full on hissy fit. And it was really weird. He had a storm. I don't phone base. I was sitting there, I was so embarrassed, but at the same time, it's like I kind of understood it differently.
Not being able to manage.
I was like looking at him, I was like, look, go outside, have a little calm me down strop, and he's like, all right, well, I'll be outside, and I was just like, fucking you're an adult, and I was just like, but it's not fair on him.
And it's because
I get it.
If you think of Maslow, if you think of the hierarchy of needs,
I've heard that since.
Yeah, have you not? It's funny. So Maslow's like in psychology, you've got the hierarchy of needs.
Oh yeah.
So obviously your basic need, go up, self-actualization at the top. I remember when my mum was dying, Mum, for the last 10 days of her life, she was in a hospice, and I used to sleep there. And the nurse, I had these really in-depth chats with the night nurses, and this nurse said to me, from what you've told me, it sounds like you've just actualised before your father, or before some. So you can be you could be like the youngest child in the family, but you can be further along the ladder and that your parent, and that's why you get the frustrations, you get the fucking hell, why don't you get me, why don't you just understand me?
As a child?
No, as an adult, you realise that you've got. So basically, Maslow says you get to these stages, and at the very top, you self-actualise, which is when you really think you know who you are.
Because for some of them, you need food, you need.
Your basic needs are like shelter and water, and then obviously things like education. And there's work. And then you've got actualisation. And it's this.
So the interesting thing
you could get there before your parent, basically, and that's why you feel misunderstood.
I guess it's also a point
something that you learn.
Because my dad's a world-class engineer, and he's really amazing. But he was the youngest member of the IEE in the world in its history as well, and he was offered the chairmanship or something at one point, which is really cool. But he's never had any interest in psychology at all, as far as I know.
But I referring back, what I was saying about my dad earlier. I got to a point recently where I said to my dad, "You know what? Thank you for teaching me how to ride a bike, and thank you for teaching me how to swim." Because I realised I'd spent my entire life going in there like a bull, and he going, "You never did this. Why did you act this way? Why was you like this with such and such?" And no one, regardless of the wrongs that someone has done, if you're constantly met with that, you're never going to respond well, because you're going to feel like you're attacked. The moment I changed my pattern and went there and said, "You know what? You've taught me quite a lot."
I bet that meant a lot.
The moment that I switched it, I then found that we could have a better dialogue.
When you said that to him.
Well, I just think that.
Not in a negative way.
I think that change. I think my observation is that if you change the pattern of the dialogue you have with your parent, even if you're angry, actually step back and go back. What good things has that parent given me? And go in on that. In teaching, we call it 2 stars and a wish. Yeah, so in a way, you go in and you give 2 compliments, and then you kind of give the.
For every put down, you have to put up. You have to have 2 put ups.
So in a way, if you take that idea and you apply it to your parents, go in and be like, "You know what? I realise I loved it when you took me ice skating, and I used to love it when you always fixed my bike. Sometimes I wish that you might have been a bit better at supporting me emotionally."
It's the recognition,
but and maybe it's a better way of approaching it. It helped, and I ended up having dialogues with my father that were what I probably would never expect. He would give me a bit of clarity about my parents' marriage, and
it's quite hard to open up to that about that to your kid, even as an adult.
Equally, thinking about ADHD, he had little memory. often he would say. And
it can be quite difficult with the emotional stuff, because I mean, like, I got shitty this morning, and I knew I could understand it objectively, but I still felt frustrated.
But of course,
nothing wrong.
When I never looked at my dad through those eyes, I used to think it was an excuse. Oh yeah, you don't remember.
Excuse.
But actually, I started to think, well, actually, do you remember? And actually, is that something to do with your executive functioning? Actually, is it something more chemical and?
It's more about the emotions carrying you to in that direction. So if you're angry, you feel angry, and then that polarizes how you remember things, and that's not
well, and that's interesting, because there was a point when there was a part of his life where he was always very angry, but I realised when I was always interested in family history, and when I looked at my granddad's history, and when I looked at my granddad's story, and I understood what my granddad had been through. My granddad was in care, like his parents had died young, they were drinkers, but it's a bit vague. No one knows if he was taken into care or they died, but he was in care from the age of 9, and when he was 16 he was taken out by one of his stepsisters, and he walked out of the care home like the Bernardos with no shoes on, and who knows what would have happened to him in the 1920s. So my granddad came out a man that was wounded, a wounded boy, who would have been careful.
Then he went on to have
kids. My father, right?
Yeah.
And then when my dad didn't really know my granddad. My granddad was in the Burmese War. My granddad served in India. And recently my dad's been given these medals that my granddad's, and my dad was really chuffed to be given them. But who knows what went on? And I think it doesn't justify it, but it makes you forgive a bit. I think it makes you understand that no one, and this is what I mean, is I've come to think that no one is inherently evil. No one wakes up and decides they want to cause anyone unjust. No one wakes up and decides they want to cause anyone harm. It's the learning.
I guess.
But even
the shock of that was the fact that they sounded like normal people.
But even Hitler was conditioned.
Yeah.
Even Hitler had a childhood. Even everyone has a past.
His childhood.
No one is just born and gets, "Hello, I'm Johnny. I'm evil,"
and I want to.
I guess your childhood forms who you are as an adult, and like your traumas and everything
massively,
plays into
I don't
that.
think it's just childhood, though. I think it's
even in utero. So even when you're in the womb, your life is carved out for you. Do you know they've now proven with epigenetics that you spent a bit of time in your nan's womb. So basically, when your nan was pregnant with your mum, not only was your mum's eggs forming, but the eggs of the eggs were forming.
Oh yeah, because you're born with your eggs.
Yeah. So at some point, briefly, when you were a fetus in your mum's tummy,
an egg is a small child. Do they grow as you? Sorry, we should probably be able
so
to.
when
a woman's born, she's born with her eggs.
And
she can't create any new eggs.
Yeah.
So you just kind of
like the same eggs.
So when you're
big tummies then, because it's got to fit somewhere.
So when your nan was pregnant with your mum already had her eggs formed.
Yeah. You're born with the eggs.
Yeah.
And those eggs last your lifetime.
So 3 generations of women are affected.
You
so
didn't know
that's
that?
why when they say,
I just kind of assumed it was something that happened
you're
from
born
puberty,
with it,
and like you grew your eggs as.
No,
but I never had a reason to think.
It's not like
there was a point
sperm when you sort of develop them.
Yeah, because like women just regenerate.
Yeah, women
a similar thing.
Women are born with their eggs, and that's all they have for their lifetime. And then eventually, when they get to a certain age, they go through menopause, and then they just run out. They run out of eggs.
It's interesting because so that really means at a key point in your nan's life, your nan carried you for a little period. And my nan was really stoic and quite cold, And
Mum was lovely.
No, my nan was lovely too. But we grew up. My mum,
different generation.
Yeah, it wasn't. Mum,
even my grand, she's lovely as well, but she's like more stern.
Like my mum grew up on farms. Like farmhands, like milkmaids. Like you were fucking the servant.
Yeah, my nan was probably one of the most generous people I've ever known.
But that I always beckon people to think about when they're like, well, actually, and I always had back to my granddad. I always had a soft spot for him. But he was my mum always used to say he was a really clever man, really smart, and but he just had must have had an awful life, and it's interesting now, all these years later as a therapist, I've got a soft spot to work for working with kids in care. And if you think my grandfather had been in care, and I never really made the connection, but when I kind of have really sat with it, I was like, fuck, like, maybe it's because I see the knock-on effect of what it does.
So it's kind of like ingrained in you because you've kind of already...
Well, because I saw, what had happened to my granddad had a knock-on effect on his ability or inability to be a father, and how it's impacted free...
Because he'd have gone through a bit... He'd have experienced the wars.
Well, he was in the war, yeah, and he was a deserter. Like he left, he ran, he hid.
So is this the Second World War?
To be fair, yeah,
and also he served in the Burmese,
right,
and served in India as well. And he was a young man. He was 19.
I mean, to be fair, if someone's shooting at me and it's like, oh, for king and country, it's like, I kind of want to go back home to my girlfriend.
Like 19, imagine like your life coming to an end.
I wouldn't want to be okay. I mean, because it's like everyone's like, oh yeah, he's a deserter, but it's like, well,
you're 19, you got your whole life.
Him in a position
because you don't know what you've got yourself into.
Yeah, and it's
you
like
don't know what you've decided to sign up for.
Yeah. The world around is exploding. His best mate's head just blew off.
Yeah,
like that's and you're not exactly going to give him the same care he needs. I'd fucking leg it. If I was under that kind of situation, I mean, I'm not saying that, no one knows what they'd do, but the truth is that it's flight or fight, and it's a 50.
Honestly, I'll trade my passport in to not go.
I'd be out of there. I mean, like, look at all those Russian guys. They're out of there.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because, like, when I look at my dad and when I look at my aunt, because my uncle died recently and my aunt has been very stoic about it. And I was saying to my sister, it's all part of that generation of like, that kind of... Yeah, stiff upper lip, but also they were taught to be... stoic, but you know what?
Has that ever benefited anybody?
I think there's a for and against, right? Because if you, like you were saying earlier, if you're so in your emotions and you're so in your head, you can't operate, right? So then you get those people that have just gone, oh well, it's part of life, move on.
It's the ability.
And
to
I'm not saying that's fully good.
Appreciate it. I think that's what makes an adult these days.
I'm not saying that's fully good either. But if you can take a bit of the emotional, I need to understand myself, and the just like get on with it, and you can marry it together, right? It could make the perfect recipe, because though if you think. I was saying to my friend Nancy earlier that my dad's 74 now. He's sadly recently had a diagnosis of a blood issue, and he just went, what can I do? I just got to be better, haven't I? Be healthier. Can you give me some advice on some vitamins? And I was like, of course I can.
Oh, and
and so
I mean, fair play to him.
Yeah, and so what can they do? And so. And if you think my dad's gone for his entire life, he ain't donned all these vitamins. He hasn't taken all this kimchi and this sauerkraut and all this vitamin D, and he hasn't And don't get me wrong, I take all this stuff. I'm all about gut bio and gut health and all that. But all these people that lived on bread and butter in their kids' years, all of a sudden, they're in their 70s and they're still living. So it makes you wonder. Yes, it works.
I mean, they do live for less time than these days the kids will, because, I mean, over nutrition and things like that. But, I think that...
I think a big part of it is stress. I think a massive part of it is stress. My mum ate better than my father. But my mum was always stressed, and she died at 62.
I think stress is a huge element of it, and I think that it's like, you can eat whatever you like, but at the same time, if your body's constantly screaming, and it does destroy your body.
It needs rest. I think rest is the recipe of a lot. I think rest is the recipe.
They said like what Martin Luther King died in his 30s, but his heart was like 70 years old. Stress he went through.
Yeah. So think about it. So why is it that you meet people that don't lift a finger in their whole life, and they live till they're 90?
Yeah. You have to be the right level of activity.
Because of activity, because of stress, because of exertion. But rest.
There's that huge, there's quite a lot of quiet quitting, that backlash from, this generation, the generation plus, where they're maybe this hustle culture isn't really the best idea, maybe we're just being taken advantage of. And it's true, I think, to an extent. I mean, having been a journalist, for example, I have no concept of what is, hard work to other people, and that's what I found quite difficult to adjust. That was the biggest adjustment I had to make.
Well, it depends what you define as hard work. You can do a job where you don't have physical exertion, but your mental capacity is lobotomy.
Tick, tick, go,
for one flew over the cuckoo nest.
I don't see that many deer burning out. You know, like that's what I'm thinking. I was like, this isn't okay.
Yeah.
You know, like no one else gives a shit, enough of a shit, and there's me unable to sleep. This is not a normal thing.
But it's physical rest for sure, because like I think that if you get enough sleep and rest, and you can harness, you can see your body as an ecosystem in itself, and you can honour the rest it needs, you're halfway there. I think when you get people that have unfortunate scenarios, it's like freak scenarios where one-offs, like the body, like we have a design flaw, don't we? As humans, our only design flaw is that we have to sleep 8 hours a day. Like, when you think they make robots, when they eventually make robots, do you think they're going to make them sleep? Probably not. So our only design
for recharge the batteries, quite literally.
Maybe, but if we're talking about God, divinity, and all that, if we were made from a higher source, sometimes I think, well, maybe out there, maybe we were. Maybe I sometimes look and think. Even today, I looked and was like, isn't it funny that we can? Even our fingers and our hands, like we've been made in a way where it's
I definitely think that we had a creator, whether you believe it's God,
a design element to it,
evolution.
Have you ever watched those episodes called Ancient Aliens?
Yes, I did. Yeah,
I was obsessed with it.
Yeah, I did.
To the point where I started hearing things around my house, and I was like, "Is it the alien talking to me?"
Well,
I had to be like, my girlfriend, she gets freaked out.
Third cut you quickly,
and it's when the cat stays over and just stares into the hallway, and I'm like, "Fuck this, I'm out." So the body of Christ compels you. There's me going around with shaving cream.
to go off point really badly. Have you seen the thing about they found aliens and all that in the Congress?
Yeah, they find that every
they found all the that's true.
So they basically in Mexico, they found aliens.
That one, that body there.
Yeah, the body. And apparently in Congress, somebody said that there's been a big cover up and the aliens are real. They found spaceships. They found all these things.
Ancient aliens, though. Yeah. Have you not actually, when you really look into that and you delve into it, you're like, well, like fuck me, like, is this what are we being? What are we being?
We went from childhood trauma to ancient aliens, guys. Yeah. Come on.
It's off point, man.
Okay, it is off point, but like, it wasn't until I watched that show I was like, Jesus, these people have got a point.
It does make
something here makes sense, and what are people covering up? What are people covering up?
I feel like statistically there has to be, because it's like something like if there's 10,000 planets that are similar to Earth in the solar system that would be able to hold life, and we've gone through 4, 5, 6 different reincarnations of life on Earth. You had the Jurassic period, you had everything like that. It doesn't make sense to me that there wouldn't be an ability to do that in any other place, and it takes a couple of million years to be able to go from being a slug to a human, easy peasy. Well, not easy peasy, but on the scale of it. It would be bizarre if there wasn't.
I think if you can get really down and down and depthful with the earth, and you can sit and think God, even when you lay on the earth and you lay down and you look at the sky and you look at the way you're made and you think, God, all this stuff is so quite magical. And you think about the kind of networks of the kind of soil and the sub-earth and the ants and all the kind of everything that goes on, the layers of the earth that exist.
It puts it into perspective, because it's like now I'm thinking about Jenny from accounting being a bitch. Jesus, and that's what I spent all of my last night worrying.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't sweat the small stuff. I mean, gosh, I love teaching, but the one thing I will never miss is the staff room. No. Because it was like a microcosm.
I think teacher stories are the best. I love teacher stories, but for me, it's offices. I can't.
But that's when I started to think I could be neurodiverse, because I used to go into the staff room and I couldn't do small talk. No, I didn't care about all the small shit. No. I wanted to go deep.
I need a conversation.
People didn't want that sometimes,
And that's why we do podcasts these days. I reckon most people who have a podcast, we're all a little. There's a certain breed, I think middle class and white.
I think it's a dialogue that's. I've got this theory that in 50 years' time you're going to meet someone and they go, "Oh yeah, hey, I'm neurotypical," and you'll go, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Yeah, it's like there, it's going to be okay. I just for me.
Wait, sorry about.
Yeah, it's a bit like how being gay was frowned upon, but then because it's they're soft and whatever. It's like, And it's like, they fuck men. It's like, how are they soft? They're the hardest bloke in it.
But all that stuff has gone on for years, hasn't it? It's like.
Or from the Greek, the Roman,
the Greeks. I mean, they were the most amazing warriors.
Nothing new. It's nothing new.
I just don't understand how it could have gone out of fashion. It seems to go in and out of fashion.
He's like, I wish it hadn't.
So, every 50 years or so, it's like, all right, being gay's bad now. All right, okay.
No, but it's like, why does there have to be a label for everything?
Oh, it's exhausting. It's a bit like that racist.
Who came up with the concept of labels?
I quite enjoy. I quite like when you find it, when you get called a new one,
especially when there's a double standard with it. Like, I guess
yeah. No, but what it is it's scientifically they're taking scientific sounding words that end in "ist" usually, and they are they're using it to make it sound like they have an authority, a subconscious authority that doesn't exist. It's just saying, I'm scared of you.
Who somewhere said we have to take this group of growing numbers of people and define them?
Probably the Nazis.
Someone somewhere must have had to say, we need to give a name to this. Like, where did that even come from, this concept?
Well,
why do we have to give a name to it?
But also, why does it have to be such an extreme label? Because it's like, I think that everyone's slightly xenophobic. People feel what they don't know naturally. So we're scared of the dark. So I think that when you have a community of people who come along and people are like, what's that about? They're acting different to us. There's a curiosity, but there's also a fear. And I think, though, that's what leads to,
it's training,
that's what
isn't
leads
it?
to all of it.
It's like you've been given, like, it literally is. Like, and I mean...
All it takes is a few rumours to be like babies or something stupid, and people might believe it, and then that's where you end up with racism. That's where you end up with xenophobia.
Yeah, the education system teaches a formula. It's a conditioning that's still very out of date. That's about factory line stuff, and they come in and they'll basically give you they're censoring what they think you need to know, and it's the white privilege, which it is. Eton kind of educated the Boris
That's a very different kind of education.
Boris Johnsons of the world that are deciding what we learn.
But they're trained.
But how great is it now that people are coming out and saying, "Well, no, we need to know this."
Yeah.
Like, how sad is it? Like, if you think about like Benjamin Zephaniah dying, like rest in peace, dear brother. Rest in power, right? I was distraught, because I used to read his books relentlessly to my class, and like as an just as. I don't want to say as an alternative, but back then it was an alternative because he was a rarity. He was the alternative, right? Yeah. He came out and he wasn't the peacemaker. He was the troublemaker. He was the person that wanted to make
the person that
ruffle.
The person that turned down the OBE or the MBE.
Yeah.
He turned down the MBE?
Yeah. I can't believe he was 65 over you. Fucking didn't look it.
The worst thing about it,
I've only known from the obituaries.
The worst thing about it, he only knew that he had like a brain tumor 8 weeks ago, and now he's gone.
Sometimes I wonder whether that's like, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong, but sometimes I wonder, like, if you get to that point where there's nothing you can do, and you've lived a good life, and you ain't got to go through the hell of treatment. So my mum went through a year of treatment. She had a rare cancer, like 20 in a million got cancer, right? No
There's
one,
fuck all research
treatment,
on that.
right? And she went through the wars, right? So like, it's like, and the hardest thing is when you see them lose their confidence and their dignity of being independent, and if you think about someone like Benjamin Zephaniah, he was strong and he had willpower, and could he have coped with being ill for years and years and years? So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but like when something's struck upon you like that, it's quick.
Yeah, it's better.
Quick.
I'd much rather just go like that.
You actually met him in person.
Yeah. It was at Life and Rhymes, like BBC Art started doing that stuff, and he started presenting it, and it was beautiful that he done that gig, and it was nice to meet him, and he actually spent a bit of time living in Leytonstone, so myself and him chatted quite a bit about the work he'd done in Leytonstone schools, and phenomenal guy, but actually there's so much to him. It's the same with Lem Sasay. I love Lem Sasay as well, and actually Lem Sasay was there with Benjamin, and they had this rapport that was beautiful, like they were brothers. And then today Lem Sasay has put this post out saying he was my family, he was like my older brother, and but there's so much to poets I don't even know. Like, you meet people where they're at. You meet people where they're at. But if I went back, if I researched Benjamin Zephaniah, you'd learn a whole host of shit you never knew. Yeah, and it's the same. Like you read something that's current, but you don't know half of what this person's done. And I've actually, I'll be honest, there's a handful of stuff with Benjamin Zaffino I don't know he's done, and I'm going to go back and have a look.
Yeah, you need to.
He
was a legend.
Yeah,
it's difficult because it's like, you know, like how do you encapsulate a life in an obituary? And that's what we always try to do. We try and make everything bite-sized, but actually, some things shouldn't be.
Sometimes you can't make it.
And especially when you only just kind of encounter something and it's, I need to do the research on this person, but I'm all right, thanks. I'm
definitely not all right.
No, I do need to go home soon because it's getting a bit late for me and I've got to get back. I'm about an hour and a half away.
Before we wrap up, I want.
Do you want some of mine?
No, I'm all right.
No, I'm good.
You cockney, you stole it all.
You little bugger. Like, you know, it's all right, boys. Hands in pockets. She's going for the hooch. She's gonna go for the cupboards.
Before we
don't leave her alone, Marlon.
before we
don't put that in the fucking recording. I'm gonna get called 15. You're cockneyist now. Fuck off.
Right?
Racist. Jesus. I'm sorry. It got me.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's not a nice thing to be called, is it? But back in the day, a lot of cockneys were criminals.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people that were, you know, criminal activity. There's still a lot of people out there that do criminal activity. You know, like
you're going to get crime everywhere, aren't you? Otherwise, it wouldn't be defined, and there wouldn't be criminology. There wouldn't be a legal system.
But also, when you get comments like that, you've got to realise that you either just block them. Yeah. You know, and even sometimes you don't even have to succumb to their comments. What you do is you just block it straight away.
No, but for me, what I take it, I always take negative comments as a positive because I feel like if I've moved you to the point that you actually had to write something, I've done something well because like there's so much content. There's so much content out there with TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Is that you can ignore? People ignore all the time. The fact that I've done something that triggers something in you to comment, I take it as a positive.
Yeah, but
and if you're going to do something negative, I'm not going to even acknowledge you. I'm just going to be like, well, okay, I've moved you somehow.
I've made you think.
Yeah, you've watched my episode and you've commented. So I don't take it. I never take it as a negative.
I like the ones where the people say, yeah, you know, this resonated with me.
I think as a white person to be called racist, it's
so scary. But actually,
it's a painful thing.
It's all bullshit as well. Like
for the pretty switched on, fair, loving, empathetic white person, I think to be called a racist is it's an insult. It's an insult because the average, you know, of course you're always going to get the wrong uns out there, and I'll be the first to put those wrong uns in their place.
Racism and their sort of fashion of saying
it's a painful thing because there's a lot of people out there that strive to do.
It's a nasty thing to be called.
It's inaccurate because it's like, I mean, like, don't get me wrong,
unless you are it.
There's racist and there's sort of saying something that's like that sounds racist or something that's, you know, like that can be misinterpreted. I mean, like, for example, if I was a copper and I pulled you over because you were black, then that's racist. If I'm a copper and I pulled you over because we happen to be in a predominantly black area and, you know, like, and you're driving a car that looks a bit like it's been stolen, that's not racist. So it's the reason behind what is the
story behind it. Also, I think that
it's the motive.
And
the only to play devil's advocate here, the only thing I could say with that situation is that people don't like things being compared to racism. So that's the only,
because it's a separate.
It's just such an easy
it's a separate struggle. So that's the only thing I could be like. I can empathize that. Okay, I get where that person's. I don't know what their background is, but I get where they're coming from.
But it's just such an extreme thing to say.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was racist. I think it was a very light comment. It was just like you just said, "Oh, it's like discriminating something because they're black."
It's a demonstration of discrimination. It's not necessary, but you know, to liken two different discriminative practices is not the same.
But people just don't like
those things. But it's just that, you know, like everyone gets triggered by something. I mean, this.
I think that, you know, like if you say you take someone really like respected, like a Carlo or someone like that, and they
poet. Another poet.
Yeah,
she's smashing out the names.
Right, and he puts a thought pattern out there. He puts he puts something out that makes you think, and you chew the nugget over, and you chew the thought over it. Because I've got friends like that. A friend of mine. A friend of mine is someone that will like will plant a seed in my head, and 4 months later I'll still chewing about it because it's a real thought thing, right?
So for anybody listening, Carlo's Miss Dynamite's little brother.
Yeah, so you take him.
He wrote a book about racism.
Phenomenal bloke.
Yeah.
But you take something like, if he puts a nugget, you know, and in a way maybe he could say, you know, he could say something risque and he'd still put a nugget in and people would chew it, right? I think that it's difficult when you... I think there's still so much unsaid dialogue that needs to be said around everything. Like, you know, I think there's a lot of like I want to articulate this right, but there's a lot of like kind of white narrative out there that wants to be heard, right? And it's a valid whiteness, you know, and it's not about it's not got any negativity attached to it. It just wants a voice, right? But I think even though it's not going to offend anyone, people are still finding it. Yeah. People are still scared it's going to offend. So therefore, no one's coming out and saying anything. Yeah. And it might not. The dialogue that needs to happen has got no connection to race. But maybe people are scared that if they come out and say something, people are going to connect it to race.
I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem in society.
Connect it to something so divisive, especially in America.
I feel like we should be able to have dialogue about racism, dialogue about race, dialogue about being who you are, without it being like you're a racist. You should be able to have those dialogues in society.
You should be able to make jokes about sort of things like that, but in a way that's not. Where you don't. I think it's that overbearing consciousness
because it's a point of comparison, and like you're saying, in the same way people don't want comparison. If a white person comes out, like you say, and you might say, I've had this difficult scenario, it doesn't compare based on what black people have been through. You know, Indian people or the Sikh have had to experience in the Kashmiri divides, and you know. But people still feel they want to come out and voice it. But maybe sometimes that some people don't know how, like because they don't want to offend. And there's stories out there. And the way I see it is, it's not about tit for tat. It's not about your story. Where does it score on my story? It's about these people. There's a whole host of people that might just want to record their stories. They might just want to share their oral history of the time. Yeah. So if I went back for 70 years and I interviewed someone from Cockney London, their story about Cockney London would be very different to 50 years forward. And if I verbatim recorded it like this on a mic and I let that person just speak, there might be stuff within their talk. There might be stuff within that talk, not necessarily that, but there might be stuff within that talk that isn't necessarily, I'm not saying the M word, but it might be politically incorrect. But they don't mean no harm by it. It's just that they were taught that at the time through the culture. They now know it ain't right. But nonetheless, that's how they were conditioned.
That's like when I go back and watch certain TV shows. Like I like Porridge, for example.
I mean, Little Britain, that did not age well.
I like Porridge, for example. I can't fit with one of the Ronnies. Yeah. And he was like, some of the jokes that was made was like anti-black.
Oh, that's so wrong, isn't it?
It's wrong, but I enjoy that show. I don't think it should be taken.
You did it at the time, perhaps you didn't. Yeah.
But I don't think now we should be retroactively be like, take that.
We want to reproduce certain jokes.
Well, no, because it's still part of the kind of history.
It belongs in that time.
It's an interesting point. Yeah, it's an interesting point. I mean, did you ever watch episodes of Some Mothers Do Heaven?
No, I didn't watch it.
Did you ever watch the Alf Garnett stuff? No, that stuff. No. That was like hardcore, wasn't it? Look that up. See what you think of that. That was like hardcore. None of that would be allowed now.
Yeah, there's a lot of shows now that wouldn't be allowed. I don't think it should be taken down.
There's some stuff now that comes out and it's just not that interesting.
Yeah.
And it's, it tries too hard to be inclusive for everyone. And if you include everyone, then you lose the concept of humour, which is the reason we laugh is it's the same as monkeys, is because we're trying to bring someone back into the group.
Well, also it's because often we make comedy around things we're unfamiliar with.
Yeah, familiarity, tragedy. I mean, look at Michael.
But I'm not. I mean, I don't. If you take away everything,
there's definitely something in my eye. It's not related to the conversation.
You hear a joke about something, and you laugh. And this is my argument. I mean, I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but comedians, as an example, I remember once watching a Dave Chappelle. Thing, right? I do too. But it was after the whole documentary around Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And I watched that documentary based on the work I do.
That Leaving Neverland.
Yeah. And I was like, things were a bit shady for me after. So I was like, well, this is a bit. This is. Yeah, but, and then Dave Chappelle kind of came out and said, made joke of it and completely ridiculed the two blokes that spoke out. Yeah. And I thought, and loads of people hounded him a bit, you don't know if it's true or not. But comedy is comedy, right? So
it's the ability to laugh at society. I think that's the beautiful thing about
that's when,
these things.
Yeah,
it's like when you lose sight of that, then we take
because comedy isn't flaky, is it?
Exhausted. Huh?
Comedy can't be flaky.
No, but it's also like, I mean, good.
So if you're going to laugh about this, but you say this can't be laughed about.
Yeah, then you're not doing the job properly.
No, but I do think, I like, in my opinion, I don't think, I don't particularly think paedophilia can be laughed about. Did you ever watch?
I don't know. I mean, it's the way that paedophilia sometimes. Well, I mean, I wouldn't make a joke of paedophilia anyway, just because it's just not funny, but.
What was that show though? It's called League of Gentlemen?
Oh yeah. What with the guy who looks a bit like a pig, and it's they used to freak me out. I didn't like it.
That get banned though. So I think I think that's the one area for me, like amongst the probably other areas. There's many other areas, but that particularly shouldn't be laughed about. So maybe comedians should be told don't joke about that, but they still do.
I mean, there's things you should. That need to be ridiculed. Things like politicians, the whole concept of comedy. You've got cartoons that date back to the printing press, where people were taking the piss out of the people who ruled them because it keeps them in check in a way. And if you can laugh at the people who are actually making your children starve, it's a relief. It's to say, okay, well, yeah, the world's shit. Let's, what are you going to do? You're going to cry about it?
Yeah, it's almost like people on a serious note go, you shouldn't be laughing about that. That makes
but those people shouldn't be the ones who are in charge of comedy, because if you can't tell a joke, or if you're one of those people who doesn't really laugh about it. I mean, one of my ex-girlfriends.
It's hypocrisy, isn't it? It's hypocrisy of the world.
Yeah, and it's exhausting.
It really is, yeah.
Because I think that we need laughter, especially in dark times. And if you can't laugh about something dark. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how morally justifiable or whatever. I mean, this is not about a case of being virtuous or not. It's, did it make you go? In which case, then there's nothing wrong with that, is there? It made you happy for a moment. Enjoy being happy for a moment, and then afterwards feel absolute shame.
Well, I mean. It's funny, isn't it? Like, I remember back in the day, all like the English, Irishman, Scottishman jokes.
Oh yeah, that's the one. That was the ones you knew when you were a kid, though, wasn't it? It's like the Pope walks into a bar with a rabbi and whatever, and that's
they
how
were
they
all
always
just
started.
they were just like the jokes that no one said, but you were like, oh my god, but it almost built your sarcasm, didn't it? It built your astuteness to understand the world
as well, and the also
wrongness of the world,
and to see differences not necessarily as something divisive, but to see them as something entertaining.
Yeah,
and then that breeds curiosity. I think it's important.
Well, it breeds questioning. So you might say, I didn't know about the Pope, but now I'm going to go away and look it up.
Yeah, or I mean, let's face it, he defended paedophiles, and there's an entire system that's not him specifically, but it's a system. I mean, I think that's a bit more fucked up than a joke. But we don't necessarily joke about it. Anyway,
before we end, I'll ask you one question about your writing process.
Okay.
How do you write your poems?
It's a hard one, that, because it depends really. Like, I can wake up and I can think, I've got an idea, I've got a theme, I'm going to sit down and I start with a very simple brainstorm. So say I take something like, if I want to brainstorm something about class, I put class as a word in the middle, I brainstorm and I write the words that go around that, and then I brainstorm around the words that go around that, and then I keep brainstorming until I end up with a spiral of words all around that singular word. Mm-hmm. And then I look at all the words that's been created around that one word.
Just like you build the theme around the word and then you can pull it together.
Yeah, the connotations and the sounds and it could be anything. It doesn't only have to be words. It could be sounds. It could be themes.
When you write your poetry, is it about rhymes as well?
Sometimes it's about rhyme. Like sometimes, first I'll start with all the words that are connected to it. Then I'll look at the words that might be rhythmically connected to it. Too much wine. And and then I jot.
Can't get your words out.
Yeah. And then I jot them down as well, and then I sound it out. But then sometimes, like recently, as an example, I've not started writing this poem properly yet. But I was in the car, and this happens to me a lot. So I voice note in the car a lot. So I've got about 500 voice notes that I've got to transcribe at some point.
Oh, I do those.
And sometimes me and my mates play them back for fun. Like occasionally she'll say, play number 5. And I'll play it and we'll be like, the fuck? I could play one for you now.
What was I on?
We could play one now. We'd be like, the fuck does that say? You know.
It's interesting how you do that because, like, yeah.
But I was in the car one day and I was like, so when I left London, I was like, I was just going to leave in London to go to Margate, and I was like, I've locked lips for the unlit bits of this city. And I was like, oh, that sounds good. And it was all the rhythm.
Sounds like we're slogging clams.
I didn't mean slogging clams. You know.
No, they came out wrong. Sorry,
and then what I do is
like...
I keep saying it. I've locked lips for the unlit bits of this city. I lock lips for the unlit bits. And then I even get tongue-tied. I've locked lips for the unlit bits of this. And when I get tongue-tied, I think about the sounds that come off the tongue-tie.
That's interesting.
You know, so like I just play around with how it actually sounds, even in error. In
error is good because it's like, it's that whole red lorry, yellow lorry, and then the next thing you know, she's like, blah.
So
do you actually write it down, or do you try to memorize it off the top of your head?
Sometimes it comes to me as a rhythm, as a word that sounds nice. Sometimes I write it down and I've got a theme and I think I really want to write a poem about this. Let me try and come up with some words. It can vary, so it depends. Like some poems I've written purely based on something that's set. Like I've started with one line, and then I've run with it. And then other times, like one of my poems, "No Anagram in I," which I've not read for a while. I did an Instagram post, and I wrote it as a caption. The first paragraph I wrote as a caption, and I looked at it and I was like, "Fuck, that's a really good opener for a poem." And I took that caption. And I've just run with it, and I wrote a poem off the base of that caption. Really so I think it just depends on like the little epiphanies you get in life. Get these little epiphanies, and you're like, "Oh, I'm going to run with that," because that's the story. You never know if the story you're going to write is going to be shareable. But what you've got to know is that you've got to back your own words. So if you're backing what you say, someone else is going to resonate. That is it. You know, like you're never going to be certain that what you're writing is okay.
Yeah, but
you've got to back it.
Yeah, and then you kind of edit it again and again until you're proud of.
So sometimes it can be like there and then. Like my poem about my birthmark took me about 7 months to write. And it is a powerhouse poem. It's like a 7-minute poem, but it packs a punch every time for me. And this is the irony. When I perform it, it packs a punch for me because it's my little girl. That's where the passion comes from. Yeah, and that's why it's there. And then sometimes I've written a poem in like 2 days. You know,
it's weird how the ones you put the least effort into tend to resonate the best.
That's
what I found with articles. Is like one that I took 5 minutes on, and it's like 10,000 views, and the other one like I spent a week.
That goes with everything creative you do. You never know what's going to resonate with people. So you'd be like, you put a lot of effort into something, and then you're like, this is going to reach people, and then nobody cares. And then you do something in like a minute, and everybody. I mean, the article that I wrote. Yeah. So
But maybe what I can share later with you is maybe I can share now an anagram in I, because that's a poem that was really important to me.
Let's do that. Let's end with your poem.
Curly Wordy, Mummisms. You often told me to never judge a book by its cover. You might not know the half of it, and the story inside distinguishes the fighter from the lover. You were quick to remind me to judge people by their acts of kindness, so I could relinquish all rights to those with a selfish kind of blindness. You were adamant for me to always be myself, even if it meant being left on the shelf by men who are more selfish than women, you'd say, and those with hearts on sleeves usually pay. Men don't suffer from piles, you'd joke, because when God created man, he created the perfect arsehole. to see past the stars in your eyes, check their bankroll, avoid the ones who want to control, and find someone who's an equal. They'll cherish you and make you whole. Make sure they don't mind putting on a pair of marigolds. Now, don't go giving your cake away to any Tom, Dick or Harry. And don't think a girl's role in life is only to have kids and marry. Be a woman who endlessly strives for her goals. And don't be coerced into quenching that unquenchable thirst. Immerse yourself amongst the diverse verse of the many, not the few. Often those with indignant eyes are less likely to screw you over in life. It's hard being poor, but money, it doesn't breed happiness, it gives you choice. And often those without it have to shout with a louder voice, so mean what you say. But don't be mean when you say it. Be the maker of your own merit. And you know, when you're down on luck and low on bread, keep your head and remember that money, it doesn't guarantee life's riches. There'll be hitches and bitches and glitches and snitches, and you'll likely need many a stitches. But switch it and let it be a marker of what never to be. Often pain helps us read and truly see. So make sure you run with that resourceful code and you use what that East End jungle bestowed. I'll be rooting for you with all that we sowed. And when you hit that ceiling made of glass, remember you can't buy drive, but you can't buy class. If people make assumptions, they're the arse. When you think you've got it hard, know that people have it harder. But if you knuckle down, worship that library card and do your best, they won't only judge you by the size of your breasts. You'll be able to fly from this struggling nest, my girl, knowing you are more than enough. And you'll break free from the piss-poor handcuffs. Oh, Maggie, she may have given us our right to buy and Blair your right to an education, but be your own blurred class creation and defy anyone who tells you you can't, because you really, really can. Thank you very much.
Oh, very nice.
Woo!
Wait, do we click? We have to click.
Brilliant.
Woo, got click.
Go click.
Sorry about the first one. It's been so long since I've wrote.
Yeah,
You could use an extra of that.
I use a few bits and bobs, yeah. It's just
That's a really long one, but it's like I just haven't performed it in a while, and also maybe it's not where I'm at. Like like when you perform stuff.
Better.
Yeah,
thank
nice
you.
One, yeah. Like I think that one was quite good.
No, anagram in I is quite a deep.
Can we have the copy for it? Like,
Yeah.
And then we could just use that and just put it underneath or something.
Let's begin the wrap up.
Oh yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's a wrap.
And this is a record-breaking episode, 3 hours, 30 minutes.
Hours. I mean, like,
anyone want to sponsor?
Publish it flat.
Want to sponsor us?
We definitely have to edit this.
Sponsor talk.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Please like and subscribe. If you've made it to this point, good morning.
Well, yeah, we want to thank Curly Wordy for joining our podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, mate.
Beautiful,
And,
thank you.
I mean, that conversation took a few turns that I didn't actually expect myself. I mean, we did not prep for half of that. Yeah.
It's always the best, isn't it?
It's always what you don't plan. Well, we planned it, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But it's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you here. And honestly, it's been really nice. I've learned loads as well, which has been really good. Yeah, how about you, man?
Yeah, I learned a lot.
Good. All right, should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Good. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Bye.
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 Yeah, absolute pleasure.